Public meeting for January 16th, 2018. To my immediate left is the county attorney. To my far right is Jolene Sanchez, the assistant clerk to the board.
Ms. Sanchez, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Jackson?
Here.
Commissioner Holland?
Here.
Commissioner Sharp?
Here.
Commissioner Conti?
Good morning.
Good morning. Commissioner Baker?
Here. Commissioner Jackson, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
Certainly, please join me.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Mr. Carl, are there any modifications to the agenda this morning?
There are no modifications to the agenda.
I would entertain a motion to adopt the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Motion was made by Commissioner Sharp and seconded by Commissioner Conti. All in favor?
Aye.
That motion passes unanimously. This is the time when we open up our meeting to citizen comments for anything that's not currently scheduled to be on the agenda. If there is anyone here that would like to speak on something that's not currently on the agenda, you'll have 3 minutes, and we have little lights up here that will tell you when you're getting close to your 3-minute limit. Yellow will come on when you have 30 seconds left, and red will ask you to wrap things up. Are there any citizens that would like to approach and speak to the board about anything not on the agenda today? Seeing no one, I'll go ahead and close the citizen comment period. And we'll move on to the consent agenda. I would entertain a motion to approve the items on the consent agenda.
So, whoops, go ahead.
Motion made by Commissioner Holland and seconded by Commissioner Jackson. All in favor?
Aye.
We'll move to the general business items. We have one public hearing. This is a continuation of the public hearing for case number U17-004, Silver Creek Sporting Club, USR. And the county attorney on this will be Mr. Robert Hill. Mr. Hill, this is a continuation. Set the foundation for us, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. This case is a use by special review that was originally scheduled for hearing on December the 12th, I believe the date was. It was noticed in accordance with the Land Development Code by posting, mailing, and publication in the I-70 Scout and the Villager. Since it was continued from the December 12th issue, it was continued to this date, time certain of today at this time. The hearing or the notification carries over as part of that, so this board has jurisdiction to proceed with this continued hearing.
Thank you, Mr. Hill. Presenter this morning is Jason Reynolds, the current planning manager from Public Works and Development. Good morning, Mr. Reynolds.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the Commission. I've provided you with a number of emails that we received from the public. Those are included in your packet. Also provided 2 letters in opposition to the proposal just now, one from Arnold Hollingsworth, who's a member of the East End Advisory Commission, and one from C.G. Reynolds. There's also some additional comments from Tri-County Health Department, which we received on Friday, January 12th. The updated comments are in response to public concerns that were raised at the initial hearing about lead contamination and noise impacts. The Tri-County Health Department's updated letter provides guidance on how to address the Environmental Protection Agency's best management practices for outdoor shooting ranges, which is included in the conditions of approval. It's condition 5 in the recommended motion, requiring the applicant to follow EPA practices. Tri-County Health is recommending that the applicant conduct a study to address site-specific and range operation conditions, such as soil types, soil pH, estimated amount of shot, and other factors. And as part of the Engineering Division of Public Works and Development recommendation, staff has actually already required that the applicant provide an operations plan to ensure the safe removal of lead shot and debris, and that operations plan is a condition of staff approval for a floodplain development permit, which is covered under condition 1 of the recommended conditions. If this application is approved, the recommendations from Tri-County Health regarding lead management are already sort of under the umbrella of the conditions. Tri-County's second recommendation is that the applicant follow Colorado noise abatement statute, which requires a maximum noise level of 60 decibels, 25 feet outside a given property line, so 25 feet outside the boundary of the subject property. The applicant said they have performed noise analysis, which will hopefully help address that issue. And what is before you today is a use by special review request for the Silver Creek Sporting Club, which is on about 318 acres south of the town of Byers off of East Quincy Avenue alignment. And right now there's an existing farmhouse, a barn, and several outbuildings on the property. And the applicant is proposing a sporting club that would include a new barn, a clubhouse, 22 shooting stations for shotguns only, field hunting during the regulated season, which is about October 1st to March 31st. And they would be shipping game birds in before a hunting event, keep them on site, and would be released the day of the event. Hours of operation are proposed 7:30 a.m. to 7 p.m., Tuesday through Sunday year-round. And we have received a number of comments from the public, which were included in the packet. Main concerns were regarding noise, safety of adjacent property owners and livestock, potential decreases in property values, and effects on wildlife. Now, noise was a theme in many of the emails and contacts. The county does not have noise regulations to restrict proposed developments. However, the state does. But there's a sort of a big however there. Section 2512-109 of state statutes provides an exemption for shooting ranges. So if the county were to approve a shooting range, it would likely be very difficult to enforce any sort of noise complaints. We do have representatives from Tri-County Health as well as Colorado Parks and Wildlife to help answer questions, and the applicant is here today to present their application and provide further details. At this point, I can turn it over to the applicant unless the Board of County Commissioners has questions for staff.
Are there any questions for Jason? Commissioner Sharp.
I have a few. I think there were some questions about Byers Fire and Byers School District providing input. I think that was one of my questions. And then kind of back to this lead issue is, I think if I remember correctly, that the shooting stations are in the creek bed.
Yes, I believe nearly all of them are in the floodplain, in
Okay. So my question really is about having, if the cleanup is only 3 to 5 years, and most of this takes place in the creek bed, with rain and water in the creek, which, will happen sometime in 3 to 5 years, isn't there a lead implication there, that it's washed down the creek and off this property or to other places? So that's my question. And then I probably have others. I have a whole list of them here, but and the input from Byers Fire and School District.
Certainly. So part of the, one of the concerns the staff had was about having this, interacting with the floodplain, which is why engineering services recommends that and has made as a condition of issuing any sort of floodplain development permit that they perform an analysis of what they're going to be doing to manage lead. And Tri-County Health has provided some further clarification of what that analysis should include. Now, regarding Byers Fire District, they did receive an email. We sent it on September 11th of last year, and after receiving a no comments from Byers Fire, one of the planners in the office followed up to confirm that they actually had no comments. I also spoke with the fire chief last week and confirmed that as well. The school district did not receive a referral. We typically only include agencies that are directly impacted. So if the school district had owned property adjacent to the site, we would have likely had them as a referral agency. If this were a project that were generating students and placing a burden on the school district, they would have been a referral. So school districts are typically included in residential applications or in places where their property is directly impacted.
I think one of the questions was, Mr. Chair, if I could follow up, was the increased traffic, given that, and I think, and I have to look it up on here, that that kids would be waiting for buses and things like that, as people might be going to this, being dropped off in the afternoon or in the morning. I'm not sure when the school buses get there, and this place opens at 7. So 7 or 7:30. So I think that was only issue with regards to the school, and why I think they should have responded if their kids waiting for traffic increases in a certain area. I think the only other question that I had right now was really that noise, a traffic study and noise study. I think those are, and the road widening. I think those are still three things that I'm not sure were, and maybe some of those I need to follow up with the applicant too on some of those. But I just have to say that I'm concerned about cleanup. That's, I think in here it says a sufficient amount has been deposited, and that's 3 to 5 years. That doesn't seem like enough cleanup time for lead, considering it's in a creek bed. So,
Mr. Reynolds, do you want to address any of those comments? Or
so the traffic
I was
study,
also
noise study, and the road widening.
I was going to ask about the road widening, because I think that's why the applicant asked for a continuance last time. If you or Chuck can come up.
Yep, I'll be looking for Chuck to approach the podium. Chuck Haskins, our engineering manager. And the applicant has indicated that they've performed a noise analysis and probably be best equipped to address noise questions.
Morning, Board. Chuck Haskins, Engineering Services Division. First, if I could clarify the location of the shooting stations. It's not in the creek bed itself. It's just on the edge of the floodplain.
Okay.
These are approximate zone floodplains. They're very wide, and they're on what we call the flood fringe area. So it's not down in the creek itself, but within the limits of the 100-year floodplain. But you still make a good point, because everything will drain towards the creek bed, and that's where we are requesting an O&M plan to address lead removal.
Okay, thank you.
As far as the traffic, the applicant's engineer estimates a increase in traffic about 45 trips per day. Okay, one single family home out there is what we look at is about 10 trips a day. So it's about a 4.5. It's about 4.5 times what exists today. So it's not a lot of traffic. But I know the applicant has his engineer here, and maybe he can give you more insights into where he derived that, as well as the impact on Exmoor, I believe, was the concern for the buses. The road widening, it is my understanding, and I think the applicant will probably talk about it, is they are willing to improve the road to a minimum of the 20-foot that we discussed in December. And 20-foot is basically the minimum width for a private roadway within the county. Now, it is a public road, but what we're trying to achieve is an adequate width for two-way traffic, 2 10-foot lanes, as well as adequate width for emergency services, ingress, egress. So we think we can achieve that, and the applicant has indicated a willingness to do that. But I'll let him describe that.
Commissioner Jackson.
Thank you. A number of these items that I had, questions I had, have been referred to. In some ways, I don't know who to ask, so I'll just sort of ask, and then we'll see who answers them. But I do want to thank the citizens for their letters, because a lot of things that we need to think about were brought up in their letters. So they did a great job with that. I certainly want to, parenthetically, want to hear from the wildlife folks and the impact of the noise, especially on wildlife. I remember hearing when they moved to DIA from Stapleton that the rabbits were deaf from the airplane noise. I'm not equating that would happen, but I'm sure there's some kind of impact. So I just want to make sure that I hear about it. But my question for you two has to do a little bit with this traffic idea and my understanding of improvements that are already on the books. Are we just talking about this road widening, or are we talking about further improvements that are going to take place in that area? I'm not terribly familiar with that area, so I don't know what connects to what and how you get from here to there. And I'm hoping we'll see a map or something about, where do folks come from? How do they get there? Who else besides just right in front of this property does traffic impact? I'd like to see that. And of course the noise, and then I'd like the applicant to talk about the notification of the neighbors, because there seems to be some confusion about that. So it's all kind of all together, but it's like the details. I think we're lacking some of the detail in this project, and so
I can take an initial
please.
stab at the improvements. What we're asking of the applicant is to improve County Road 30 through adjacent to his parcel where it is deficient in width. So at some point further east, the roadway is of adequate width. So we estimate that to be about 1,000 feet of a 5 to 7 foot widening, something in that area. I don't remember the exact dimensions, and we don't have measurements along the frontage. That's what we're talking about from the applicant. In terms of the county's overall plan, Quincy Avenue, County Road 30 is Quincy Avenue. It's a main east-west corridor through the eastern edge of the county. We have a long-term vision in our transportation plan to extend that over Bijou Creek. So to extend from Bradbury Road to the west, across Bijou Creek to this road that we're talking about adjacent to the project. We will do that improvement when there's sufficient funds and needs for that. So that's what there's a couple of different improvements.
And so that's really a separate kind of issue from what we have before us today.
Absolutely.
Okay. I didn't realize it was Quincy.
Yes.
One more roadway question. Is Quincy County Road 30, is this a paved section or is this when it turns into gravel?
It's a gravel section.
It's gravel.
Got about 100 foot of pavement just west of the intersection with Exmoor. Then it's just a gravel section. And as I discussed last time, very limited traffic and very limited maintenance necessary for just one home along it.
Commissioner Sharp.
Mr. Haskins, I'm not sure I understood this. So the requirement would be to widen the road where it needs to be to 20 feet. But that's a private road requirement.
Yeah.
Is this then considered a private road, or is this something that the county is going to maintain? So my question is, shouldn't it be built to county standards instead of private road standards if it's going to be built and the county's going to maintain it?
That's certainly, an option for the board to require. We were trying to be sensitive to the fact that it is a dead-end road. Basically, you go down County Road 30 and it terminates at this driveway into the project. So we didn't see any need to widen it much more than 20 feet. You're right. Normally we would look at a section of 24 feet within a 60-foot right of way. But we were trying to be sensitive to the fact that it does not go through. It is a dead end, and dead ends at the driveway.
Yeah.
At some point we will improve it to a county standard, but we didn't think that was necessarily the responsibility of the.
And my question really comes back to, then it would be, this is a public enterprise, and I'm just not comfortable with the county coming back at some point in time and paying to widen the road for a public enterprise. Even though I understand it dead ends there, I understand there's not a lot of traffic, but then it comes back on the taxpayers to pay for it at some point in time. It seems to me that it should be improved to the standard not for a private road whenever the business goes in there. And I appreciate the point that there's not a whole lot of traffic, but I also don't want it to come back on the county to have to improve that when we've made an exception in this case. So thank you.
Are there any other questions for staff? Commissioner Jackson.
One other issue is, steer me in the right direction, but there have been a number of comments in the citizens about property values. Do we have anyone or any information on the impact of something like this on property values, or is it even relevant in our decision making? So is that something we can take into consideration?
The applicant may be able to address comparables. we don't have data on property values, next to existing shooting ranges in the county, whether those are different than property values further away.
One follow-up from Commissioner Jackson.
Yeah, sorry. So, is there a way we could get, aside from the applicant's testimony, is that something we usually do? Is look at from a real estate point of view, what impacts certain developments have on real estate values? I mean, we always say open space, man, that raises property values. Let's do that. Do we have any kind of comparables on what this kind of? I know we don't have a lot of shooting ranges, but is that something that we should be looking at?
So property values is not one of the review criteria for use by special review.
That's what I'm wondering. So it's not something that we can actually, I mean, we can think about it, but it's not one of our criteria.
It's not a specific criterion that's listed in our use by special review chapter. However, it's an important component of health, safety, and welfare generally, and we often hear about property values during.
Right. Huh. Interesting. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Jackson. Are there any other questions from the commissioners or staff? If not, then Jason, would you introduce our applicant and have them come forward?
Certainly, unless the board would like to hear from Colorado Parks and Wildlife, or would you like to hear from them after the applicant?
After the applicant, I think would be the best.
As well as Stark County.
Good morning, and if you would state your name and address for the record, please.
Morning, Commissioners and Mr. Chairman. Before I begin, let me say that I'm battling a cold, and
Can you state
voice may be a little bit weak, and I may be coughing, so I apologize for that. My name is Paul Howell. I do live in the city of Centennial, and I represent Mr. Charles Whipple and his company, Silver Creek Sporting Club, the applicant under this particular application. I'd like it noted that I am not an owner of this legal entity that will be the actual applicant. I'm merely hired as a consultant to help him process this through the USR process, and I've done that for many, many years for other people. And normally I prepare a set of notes and just go down them and talk, but because this is a very complex application, the applicant has asked me to read what he's prepared. So it's going to take a little bit of time. We are going to address many of the concerns that the public had expressed in December. It's a little longer than normal. The case is proved to be a complex assignment, and it's requiring considerable time and efforts, and has taken a number of strange twists and turns, not the least of which has been a change in the quasi-judicial process of allowing the public to speak before the applicant proposed his plan. And the staff also imposing some last-minute requirements, which was in December, and we had a continuous for. But setting that aside, we'll do our best to address everything, and I will be talking about the questions that you did raise. So that said, let me begin here. Mr. Whipple is a master-level sporting clay shooter. He has been competing in local and state and national contests since joining the National Skeet Shooting Association and the National Sporting Clay Association 25 years ago. He's been a member of Quail Run Sporting Club and Kiowa Creek Club for more than 20 years. He is an experienced manager of organized shooting events, and some of which have raised thousands of dollars for Sky High Hope and Ronald McDonald House. Mr. Whipple is a past member of the Board of Directors of Colorado Sporting Clay Association on that board. That is the governing body for this type of an activity. He places high emphasis on training and safe shooting practices and will enforce these proper practices and procedures at his club. Mr. Whipple has spent his entire business career in retail service organizations, leading one particular company to becoming the top auto glass replacement business here in Colorado. Mr. Whipple grew up in Denver, lived in the Front Range his entire life. And although one person on December 12 said that he was not a resident of Arapahoe County or the rural community, he actually does live in Arapahoe County, and he lives on about 50 acres out near Strasburg. Also with us today are our consultants, Eric McDaniels of EMK Consultants, the engineering company, Joseph Henderson, traffic engineering, Ian Patrick, sound consultant with DL Adams Associates, and as you know, Travis Harris is here from Colorado Parks and Wildlife. USR application U17004 is a request for the approval to operate a sporting clay club and game preserve on the property located at 65205 East County Road 30, Eastern Arapahoe County. We're going to have a little bit of problem because some of these are small exhibits, and I'll talk to your technician. He'll do the best he can, but they're not readable very much. And the reason I put the survey up here is that I want you to know that we had this done, and of course it's accurate. It gives me a lot of information, so we know exactly where things are. We use Google quite a bit to evaluate this property, so a number of the exhibits are going to show you pictures from that. This is an overhead aerial. It's going to prove to be a challenge, so we'll do the best we can. An overhead aerial of the subject parcel, which is 318-acre tract, rolling countryside featuring hills, substantial height, and valleys that create a significant topography variation. The large open meadow area that you have talked about is in this general area. Bijou Creek is way over here. It's about 3/8 of a mile away. And this is the 100-year floodplain, and I don't have it exactly, but it kind of runs right through here. It does include the houses and then runs up about through there. The property has a fence line to the north, which was important because when we tested the sound levels, we had to do it at that fence line, although it has been noted that that 60 decibel level is 25 foot outside the line, but we were unable to do that because the property is private property on the side, except in this case up here. And the survey indicates that there's a 32-foot offset of that fence below the property line. So if it had been in the right place, we would have been 32 foot farther to the north. So take that into consideration when I tell you about the sound decibels. There is a fence here in this red line that is the boundary for the James Ranch. And that was a comment that was talked about last in December. Somebody not being concerned about having to repair a fence and be close to the shooting area. But as you can see, that's not the case. There's a substantial area of land that's actually owned by Mr. James, but he doesn't use it at this point. The amount of floodplain area that the applicant actually is using or has access to is about 20 acres. It includes this area and this small area up here. So very little of the floodplain is his land, or would be his land. This is the area that Mr., I think if I pronounce this wrong, I'm sorry, Cale Walls, I think, spoke about the area down here in the floodplain being inaccessible and cluttered and the applicant unable to reach. But as you can see, it is quite open. There are trees down there. I'll show you a little bit better picture of that in a minute, but it's fairly open. This area here is about 175 acres of grassland. We have around 100 acres of tillable farmland that is farmed half of the year. Property has about a 1,700-foot driveway from here to County Road 30. And there are 2 surface runoff ponds, one down here and one up here, that collects from this area due to the topography flowing. This area here flows down that direction. We have an existing home, barn, and some outbuildings up in this area. What I'd like to show you now are some topography graphs that were taken off of Google. And essentially, this is the northern part of the property that we just looked at, and the property line is about here, jogs down and then across. So from here over to here is a 45-foot rise in the topography, so it's quite a climb. We'll show some of the shooting stations here in a little bit. We'll shoot towards that hill.
Okay.
I don't leave these up long enough. You let me know. So. The south end, the climb is even a lot more. From this fence line here to here is about 61 foot of climb, as shown here.
I'm sorry if I could, Mr. Chairman, if I could interrupt. Is there anything in that area on the map that you just showed that looked like some? No, it was the one you just showed a minute ago with the topography.
The north?
Yes, that one. I was actually looking at the other one, but is there anything in that area that looks like it's a little hilly that is going to be part of the shooting club that's proposed to be part of the? I understand you said, some of the stations would face to the east in that direction, but is there anything in that area?
Open
Okay.
grassland area. And the shooting stations are farthest to the west. I just mentioned they were aimed in that general direction.
Okay.
This is a long stretch of property. I think it's 2,600 feet from here to here.
Okay. Thank you.
I will.
Somebody needs to reach you.
This last section shows the more central area. The housing is right here, and the property corner line is this is, get my bearings correct here. The property line is about here, and distance over to this area is around 660 foot. So that's what that portion of the minor floodplain is that distance there. This grade from here to here rises up 13 feet, and it really comes across, and so there's an embankment that runs all along here, and that's actually where you would contain the water. The floodplain is outside that because the government errs with caution, but the actual flood area would stop with this anywhere from 8 to 13 foot embankment that runs along there.
Before you change that slide, Commissioner Holman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In looking at this particular area, will this be open for the gaming area where there'll be live game?
No.
Okay.
That we would be hunting?
Yes.
No.
Okay.
Strictly a fixed shooting positions, and it's only not even out in that big area. This is a picture from approximately the first shooting station up by the driveway. Get your bearings here. So this picture is shot from here. Now we're looking at the meadow, what we call the meadow area. Much of that property is not Mr. Whipple's, but it would be Mr. Whipple's, but it is beyond where the property lines are. There's a fence here, and then it goes up along there. The red line I mentioned earlier, that's that fence right there. Just gives you a general idea of the openness of that part of the area. This is one looking down in the floodplain area, the meadow as we call it. Very open. I know Mr. Wall was concerned about not being able to, the applicant would not be able to access that area to service and remove whatever, the debris and so forth, but it's really very, very open. And there is not a lot of clutter and debris down there. This is looking south, southwest, back up the hill a little bit. It's the type of grassland that's out there.
Sir? Sorry if I could. So is this the area that you're talking about where the shooting stations would be?
The shooting stations will be out in here. And so this is pointed south. So behind me is the meadow that we're looking at.
Okay, so are there plans to mow this or?
No.
Okay, so as far as
natural environment.
Shell debris and so forth that would be coming off of guns, is that planned to be part of the cleanup area or not?
No.
Okay, so shells.
A little bit more here in a minute.
Okay.
Keep in mind that the vast part of that area would not be Mr. Whipple's property. He only has that small amount. This property line will be here. So only this small area here and this small area up here. Everything else falls to Mr. James's property in that floodplain.
So the colors you're showing us are Mr. Whipple's property or Mr. James's property?
Both. But obviously shot out with long range. So what I was doing was pointing from here down. So some of it would show up here, but most of that would have been Mr. Whipple's in that one photo. Mentioned 100 acres of tillable farmland, and that's a picture of that. That picture runs, I believe, north-northwest. That is an overhead of the existing property. So that glare doesn't show you what it should, but the existing house, some outbuildings in the barn. There was a tremendous amount of junk and autos and so forth. The person who lived there before was an auto towing company. So they had a lot of torn up vehicles around there. That has all been cleaned up now and is gone. This entire tract of property is owned by the Culver Family Trust and is considered to be quite desirable, primarily because of all these positive characteristics with the trees and the meadows and the hills and so forth. So it's part of why Mr. Whipple was interested in it. He intends to purchase this property and operate his business as Silver Creek Sporting Club. For those who might not know, a sporting club is not the same as a trap and skeet club. Sporting clay course can be compared to a golf course in that the participants walk or ride in a golf cart along a lengthy pathway, which I'll show you here in a minute, stopping periodically to shoot clay targets like this one here. Common everyday clay target. These are launched from at the shooting stations from different angles and directions. don't. Could the technician maybe darken this up a little bit with the glare of the lights? It's just not.
There you go.
Yep. What you have is an example of the wood shooting station and the gun called gun rack. That, you'll see one of these at each of the 22 stations, and they are mobile. The ones down in the few, and the comments a little while ago were that everything was in the meadow, and you're going to see that that is no longer the case. Things have been changed since the initial application, and that was a result of the comments from last December. Just as in golf, it takes an individual quite a bit of time to play through the course, a lot of walking, big distance. Also like to note that the clay targets are biodegradable and made of non-toxic material. This is a spec sheet from the manufacturer's website. So if you want to take a look at that, I'm happy to private it for you. Sporting clay courses are designed to simulate the hunting of duck, pheasant, and other upland game birds. Mr. Whipple's course will feature 22 shooting stations along a lengthy pathway which will extend through part of the grassland area, down into and through a small part of the meadow area, and then back out and up into the grasslands at the north central part of the property. None of these stations will be shooting outside the property lines. I want to stress that again because there's major concern by the public. There's no shooting will occur or fall outside the property lines. In a moment, you're going to see that all but 4 of these stations are positioned inward to the property. This time, I'd like to take a moment to correct some misinformation that has been published in the local paper, the I-70 Scout, which has been unfortunately passed around by the residents. And that is contrary to what people think. There will be no rifle or handgun shooting, no lead slugs of that nature at this property. This is strictly a shotgun operation. No rifles, no handguns, nothing flying around to hit people off the property or on the property for that matter. And only 7.5 to number 9 shot size will be used, with 7.5 being the largest and most common shot. And these are the only shot sizes that are sanctioned for this type of a activity. There's been a lot of misinformation about the ballistics of shotgun shooting, so let me show you a couple. I don't know if we can focus more down on that. Great, that's good. You see the penny, common everyday penny, and then you see how small these shots are. This is a 7.5. This is a 9. These are the 4 sizes that are permitted in sporting clay. Very, very tiny. In one shotgun shell, you have this number of 7.5 shot. If you like, look at this. I'll pass it around. If you were to conduct a internet search for how far 7.5 shot, and that is the largest of the 4, and it travels the farthest. So if you conduct a search to establish what experts think the distance is that these are fired, or they travel, you get a lot of variation. This chart here indicates that it travels 200 yards or 600 feet for 7.5. The rest of them will be smaller than that, shorter than that. So we're going to deal with 7.5 because that's the farthest. Other experts disagree. This group, which is huntered.com, says about 790 feet. And this one down here from ammoandguncollectors.com said 800 feet. But the comments that we obtained from the Shooting Academy, this is a renowned training academy, so to speak. Everybody knows of it throughout the country that run in these circles. It's out of Phoenix. They indicated that, and what they based their analysis on was the Journy formula. And I don't know who Mr. Journy is, other than he's a Frenchman. And he figured out how far a mast will fly given its size and weight. And they indicate that 7.5 runs will fly 627 feet. So we've got 600, 627, 800, and so forth. However, the National Rifle Association and a number of other organizations in this activity, and even the Boy Scouts of America, all recommend using 900 feet as the safest shot fall distance. 900 feet would be beyond what any of these would fly, but they felt designing with 900 foot in mind was what would be prudent. So that's what the applicant has now done. I believe in December, Heather Wall expressed concern that the applicant would not control the shot size used on his course, and the applicant would like to respond in that each and every person who uses this facility will be required, just like most all the other clubs require, and that is you must register who you are. You sign a written waiver and agreement to abide by the stated rules of the club. Often this document is renewed every year, make sure it's current. And this specifically limits the shot to the 7.5 to 9. That's the only size that you're allowed to use when you compete nationally. So nobody's going to go out there anyhow and with something larger. But we're hoping that the standard size that's used at this sporting clay event, that's what's going to be enforced by the applicant, and hopefully that would satisfy the concern of Ms. Wall. As mentioned earlier, Silver Creek will also be operating a game preserve. This entails small groups of 4 or 5 hunters.
Sorry to interrupt, Mr. Howell. I'm sorry.
Yes, that's fine.
Before you move on to the next point, Commissioner Sharp.
Thank you. Before you move on from that, having been to one of these sporting clubs before, people bring their own shotguns. And how can you be sure that they are bringing the right size of the shot if they're bringing their own guns and they're bringing their own shells? Ammunition. How can you be sure that that's, or not you personally, but how can the club be sure that those requirements are being met?
I don't know of one absolute thing in the world, and therefore I can't sit here and say that absolutely everybody is going to not bring something bigger. But Mr. Whipple will be selling ammunition at the shop, at the clubhouse. People are coming in and they are saying, by signing that document, I am using 7.5 to 9. They don't have it, he will sell it to them. So he will, when people show up, that's one of the discussions they're going to have. Now, can somebody lie? Sure. Anybody can lie about anything. So I can't guarantee that to you, but normal, regular operation of these types of facilities, that's the size shot that's used. The 900 foot, remember we talked about how far 7.5 goes between 6 and 800? We have another 100 feet beyond that. So in the event somebody shoots something a little more powerful, would it reach 900 feet? Maybe. But we're talking a very rare situation.
Okay.
Commissioner Jackson.
Thank you. Before you go on to the second piece, I asked
Nancy, Mike. Sorry. Thank you. Sorry. Before we go on, I'm wondering if you do have a map that shows the stations and where they're heading.
Yes, I will put that down on that.
Oh, wonderful. That's what I want. Thank you.
Commissioner Holman.
My question has to do with the structure of the organization of the club itself. What will the annual fees be, and is there a limitation on membership?
First part of your question, would there be?
Membership fees. Yes.
Okay. I'm going to let Mr. Whipple answer that because I don't know what he is planning to do in that regard. It didn't come up before.
And please state your name and address, just for the record.
Charles Whipple, 247 South County Road, 145 in Strasburg, Colorado. You can be a member at the club as well. You can join the membership for $250 a year, or you don't need to be a member. You can just come out and shoot at a charge for that. As far as the memberships, I'm basing the first year about 250 members. And then as far as what goes on from that, obviously I liked it to build, but I'm not sure what that number would be.
Commissioner Holland, any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Whipple. Mr. Howell, if you'll continue.
Also, there's a buffer. If I could answer that, Led, if you look at the charts, even number 6 shot goes within 900 feet of the safety. It falls short of the 900 feet on our charts that we have. So there is some buffer there for, that's what the 900 feet is for, is the buffer for someone that would shoot a bigger shell. But that is loaded in there at the 900 feet. Right. 5 and 6. Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Whipple. Mr. Howell, you can continue.
As mentioned earlier, Silver Creek will also be operating a game preserve. This entails small groups of 4 to 5 persons hunting in the open field, just like you would see on any given day in Arapahoe County. Except these hunters will be under the direct supervision of guides employed by Mr. Whipple. These groups will be hunting birds such as pheasant, chukar, quail, most of which will be released into the field from the stocks maintained by the applicant. Not to say that a pheasant is going to land from somewhere else, but most of this is going to be the birds that he will sell to the hunters to go out and hunt. Now we're getting to the point where you can see the layout. All right, let's look at the proposed site plan. You can get a feel for how this is going to work. Mr. Whipple is constructing a 40 by 50 new clubhouse here, and in the future, a barn of the same size. There's in the old barn a little bit smaller than that right in this area. And behind the old barn area right here is where the bird pens will be kept. They're housed in a 100 foot area with a net over so they're free to move around, but they can't fly away. Since the December hearing date, the applicant has revised his shooting station layout. Please note that each of these cone shapes, so here's a starting point and here's the rest of the cone, that's 900 feet out from where the guns would be fired. We have 4 stations here shooting south. We have 4 stations here shooting to the west. All the rest of these shoot interior. And this one shoots interior as well, but somewhat to the north. The original plan had these 4, another 5 or 6 here, coming around, and the rest of them were back in here. Now, remember, we talked about that embankment being right along in here, so these 2 stations are below the embankment, but shooting up over it. The 22 stations are positioned along that long pathway we talked about, and these numbers 5, 7, 9, and 10, which shoot to the west, actually have almost 1,000 feet before you get to the fence line. So there's even an additional buffer there, since this is the one that we're shooting towards Mr. James's property. Let's see here. So again, I want to point out that none of the shot is going to fall outside onto other people's property. The open field areas, which would be essentially this and here, is where the supervised hunting will take place. The hunters will leave the clubhouse and either walk or be driven to a starting point. If they were to start on the north end of the property, then they would be driven along here, and there is a pathway right along this eastern fence line up to here. And then they would start and come south. They will be under the supervision of a guide. They will walk the field. So let's say that they're up here. This is, I remember exactly, like almost 4,000 feet. So they would start here and hunt this direction. They could also hunt the other direction. If they do hunt to the north, headed towards Mr. Wall's property, Mr. Whipple is going to put in place rules for his guides that says when you reach this 900-foot line, then you will stop your group. They'll unload their guns and walk around to the perimeter of the fence, go up here, reload, and start south. So there's no way anybody's going to shoot into Mr. Wall's property. This is the manner, the sporting clay courses and the open field hunting is the manner in which all the other sporting clay clubs work, especially the one that is right down the road from this proposed location. That's called Kiowa Creek Sporting Club. They operate in the same manner.
Commissioner Jackson has a question.
Thank you. This is the map I was looking for. So I appreciate that. And my next question is, I understand why you stopped the map at the borders of Mr. Whipple's proposed property, but I'm wondering where the other houses or those you've got. So I'm reading your mind. I'm sorry. I'll wait.
So an obvious question that you're going to have is, why is this different than, why is the layout different than what we had in December? The answer to that is that so much was voiced about the concern with noise that we actually went out and conducted, had a private company, an expert in the industry, conduct a study December 5th, I believe it was. And even though that wasn't required by the county, we decided that was prudent to do, to be able to give you guys the skinny on exactly what the sound's going to be at various places. So in order to meet the recommendations that the consultant made, these 5 locations, shooting stations that were up here, have all been moved down and around, and so there's only 2, and we're going to look at this last one, number 22, in a second. This is a 17-page sound study completed by D.L. Adams Associates. The company notes in that report that since Arapahoe County does not have a sound ordinance, the state noise statute would apply. And although, don't know who said this a minute ago by staff, that 60 decibels was allowed 25 foot outside the property line, what we chose to go with was the 55 decibel limit that is applicable to residences that are located opposite the property. So when you have a house outside, even though that land may be agriculturally zoned with a home on it, we treated it as a residence. And therefore we said we will not exceed 55 decibels, which is the state code for that. The state code does even have another caveat, and that is that on intermittent basis of not greater than 15 minutes at a time, you can shoot higher, and then there's an adjustment for lower. So you basically get back to where you could do 60 decibels at the property line, off and on, but we're trying to achieve 55 max at any time. The measurement of those readings by state code says it must be between the shooter and the house. So where there was a house up in this area that you can't see, we made sure that shooting was pretty much towards that house so that we get the maximum. We did some testing away, and we're going to see that in a minute. But we did our best to figure out, where we needed to move these stations so we could get the 55. All right. The red line up here, as you can kind of see, is the actual property line. There's a 23-foot offset to the fence here. Up here, a 30-foot offset. And so we stayed on this side of the fence line. The microphone was positioned 93 feet down to the west from the intersection of that fence line, which Mr. Wall certainly is, he knows what we're all about it. It's his fence line. This red line here is the actual property line, and out here the red represents that fence that is Mr. James's fence. We started at the north end, and from each of the positions that were the original shooting stations, Mr. Whipple fired. I measured direction and distance. The person up here was running the microphone, registered the readings, and those were recorded on a tape also. So as we first shot, we fired 104 decibels. We moved down, we hit 84, 74, 68, 72, 71. And you might ask why these vary. The amount of trees around you, the proximity to that embankment, and a number of factors will cause a difference in the decimal rating. So we got down to here, where we achieved 55. Out here in the open area was a 60, so by code we could have put that station number 22 up here, but in the new plan it is down here. So at that 55 level, from this fence line, which actually ought to be the red line, probably talking 53 or 4 if we'd measured it at the actual property line.
Question, Mr. Howell.
Yes.
So these on the northern part, because they were louder than what you wanted, those shooting stations were removed. Is that what you're...
That's correct.
Okay, so 22, station number 22 is the first one that you measured at 55 decibels.
The old station, this would have been, I think, 17 originally. So all of these were removed and brought, scrunched down this way and then out around a pond. So when we put this back up again, you'll see that here. So you can see this was the 55 right there. The station is pulled back a little bit from that embankment, as this one is right almost up to the embankment. And they shoot up and over out into this open field area. The rest of the stations are out here. Everything used to be pretty much back along the property line. So, because of the sound requirements, we had to make this entirely different.
And the microphone that was measuring these decibels was up closer to the northern end of the property.
Was right about there.
Okay.
And it was 700 feet south of the Walls house.
Okay.
When I quote measurements to you, I took them off of the Google map, which gives you latitude, longitude, distance by 100th of a foot, mileage. I mean, it's a fantastic tool. So very accurate.
Did you do any microphone testing from closer to Mr. James' property?
Mr. James' property, that house is a mile and a half away.
Okay.
And
so the residence
the answer
is
is no, because we didn't want to go over on that property.
The residence is the key.
Yes.
That's where.
Residence is a mile and a half away.
Thank you.
And we'll be addressing the distances of all the homes in a minute.
Okay.
Sorry, just a
question.
Yes.
Calibration of the equipment that you used that was tested and calibration of the equipment that was used for testing this sound. You're sure that it was, that you had the person out there that tested and, okay. All right. Just want to make sure that was.
Here and he can tell you how he calibrated the.
I wouldn't want to bring up my own microphone out there and, and anyway, that you do have a.
All stated in the report, but I'll let him just tell you.
Okay.
Calibrated everything.
And if you would state your name and address for the record, please, and use the microphone.
Sure. Ian Patrick with D.L. Adams Associates, 1536 Ogden Street in Denver, Colorado. Microphones we used with our testing equipment, which was a Type 1 sound level meter, was calibrated before and after the field, or in the field before and after testing. So.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
Mr. Howell?
We're now going to look at would be the overhead view of all the homes that are the closest to the property. What we measured here was the distance from the closest shooting station that was firing towards the property that is outlying here. So this is about where the existing parking lot, about where the old barn is a little south of that. That's where shooting station 1 will be. And so we went this direction to the east, and the K's have a home at 4350 South County Road 181. That distance is 1.02 miles. Lancaster's, which is south of them, is 1.28. Miss Bunner's house is 1.17 miles, 6,182 feet. Wanaklong's down on the corner are a mile and a half. Peterson, 1.33. Hazenball down here have 2 properties. Those were 1.46 and 1.54 miles. So other than this one up here, which is just pretty close to 1 mile, everybody else was outside of that. And as I said earlier, Mr. Keenan's property up here, he was 1.7 miles away, 9,242 feet through a lot of trees and a lot of rolling hills and countryside. So he's way up here, and the results are going to show that he is hardly even going to hear a small little sound, nothing. The walls are about 1,530 feet from the proposed new 22 station. And this 621 measurement was, I guess I said 700, but I think it was 621 for the microphone. So keep in mind that most of these are, except for the walls, all of them are a mile or more away. Next picture is of Kiowa Creek Sporting Club. That's coming up. So we have Kiowa Creek, 12 miles to the west in Arapahoe County. Been there quite a while. They have homes here that are 3/8 of a mile, 0.48 of a mile, 3/10 of a mile, half a mile, 3/10. All these homes, some existed before, some have been built after they opened. Those are very, very close, closer than the ones that I just showed you of Mr. Whipple's property. Quail Run, which is in Elbert County. I drew a circle of 7,500 feet, a little bit larger than a mile. There are over 75 homes in a 7,500 foot radii. So a little bit larger, about 1.1, 1.2 miles. 75 houses surround that gun club. This is Colorado Clays in Brighton. And while they have some homes that are 3,500 feet, 1,900, 1,400, 1,000, they have a total of over 100 homes just in a third of that quadrant alone. A lot of people don't have any problem living near, and especially even very close to, gun clubs. Now, this is
one question from Commissioner Conti. Sorry.
Thank you. I just wonder, while you were looking at these homes that surround other gun clubs, was any survey done to assess property values now versus when those opened?
I did not do that. This is the sound test for the south area. We showed you the one at the north end previously. And what we have here, we took the closest shooting station, which is shooting station number 1. It was S14 in the report. And then tested the sound for all of these homes that were the farthest away. The farthest, they were the closest to the proposed shooting stations. And Ian set up an ambient mic here at this location. Was there throughout the entire 3-4 hours of the testing and measured passing traffic and overhead airplanes and all kinds of things. And just before I actually talk about these red lines, I want to note that We had a couple airplanes fly over, DIA, and they were at 85 decibels. We had a number of vehicles, cars mostly, some trucks coming down 181, and those registered 75 to 80 decibels. Now remember, we're striving to achieve 55, 60 would be legally permitted, but we're striving for 55 at these houses. So here we have Kay's home. We stopped at the road. We did not go across their house. I think that's another 100 feet or so to the house. But at this point here, the sound tested 41 decibels. In front of the Bunner property, it registered 33 decibels. And, remember, cars are going by here at 70 and 80, and 75 and 80. So 33 is what we picked up for the shooting.
Commissioner Conti, one question.
Remind me again, if you can, when you talk about these decibels, like at 40, what is another common household item that would register at 40 that we would be familiar with that noise level?
That's the next thing I'll show you.
Thank you.
So down here for Wanaclong, we had 46, and down here for the House and Bog properties, we had 47 decibels. Keep in mind, all of these are a mile or so more away from that closest shooting station. Normal, everyday types of noises range all over the place. This one says that conversation without microphones is 60 decibels. A shower, everybody takes a shower, 70. Toilet flushing, 75. Alarm clock, 80. Passing diesel truck, 85. That's pretty much what we got out here. Squeeze toy for your dog or your child, 90. Some other normal, everyday air conditioners are 60. Dishwasher, 70. Vacuum cleaner, 75. Garbage disposal, 80. Lawnmower, 90. This other chart gave a lot more details, similar numbers. I wanted to put this one up because it says shotgun firing at 130. And that's your typical. You can get louder with a heavier load, but for the range that is going to be at the club, the 130 would be, if I stood right next to it, that was the number. Does that answer questions? Right. We went over the homes around the property, and I wanted to point out that I counted them best I could get, 114 homes out of those other 3 shooting clubs that were closer than any of the properties we just looked at here. So 114 people in other locations closer in to that club than the ones that are out here. So to summarize the applicant's sound study results, I think it's very fair to say that not one home will hear a shotgun sound above the state Colorado limit of 55. Those were ranging 46, 30, 33, including the Walls home because we moved everything down. So the best they're going to have at the property line is 55, but the report does say that because they're another 700 feet up the hill, you would typically drop between another 6 and 12 decibels. So 55 minus 6, they're going to be at 45 range, 47 range at their home. All right. There were a number of other concerns expressed by the public last time, so I'm trying to touch on those for you. The public notice about the hearing has been a question. So the applicant followed all the prescribed requirements from Arapahoe County for the giving of public notice. Letters were mailed to 7 adjacent property owners asking them to contact myself or the county, but not one of those 7 people contacted me, nor did they contact the applicant for information. The applicant was asked by the county to put a sign up on the Ticknell property. Ticknell property is here. Nope, I'm right. So that's the Ticknell property. I sent a letter to him. I had talked to him on the phone. He declined. He gave me a written statement saying he did not want the public notice sign on his property. After the initial announcement to the public happened, Bonnie Bunner insisted that a sign could be placed on the Helper property, which is here. And she was saying we could put a sign up there, so can't do that without permission. And Mr. Whipple went to their home. He called a couple times. He left a note at the door. He wrote a letter to mail to them, all of which we can provide you copies of, and they did not respond. They apparently didn't want a sign on their property. We also sent certified and regular mail letters to John James and the Walls asking to meet with them after we initially posted, because we heard they had some concerns. And they did not contact us at all. They refused. We got nothing back from them, even though we were willing to sit down and meet with them. So instead, it seemed like people out there wanted to just assume what they thought the facts were going to be rather than asking us directly. Any questions on that? I'm going to move on to the rest of the subjects.
I see no questions, so you may move on.
Emergency vehicle access had been touched on by Chuck Haskins. So the Byers Fire Department, we have a written statement from them which was provided. I spoke and emailed with the Sheriff's Department, worked through all their comments to provide adequate access down that road and onto the property as well. So both of those divisions were satisfied and had no objections. Traffic study. The applicant fully completed the county's process and has met the requirements imposed by County Engineering Department regarding the traffic study. Mr. Whipple did what he was asked to do, and I know that homeowners are not happy with that, but I guess I would suggest that if they're unhappy with what the regulations are, they need to petition the county to change those regulations, because we did what we were told to do. 2 things. I have driven County Road 181 a lot through the process of this property, and I found it to be wide enough. I felt safe on it. It was smooth, no potholes, properly marked with signage, and I felt that it was more than adequate to meet the traffic out there. There's a fair amount of traffic, I'll agree to that, and a lot of people moving around out there. It's part of why you have the 80 decibels constantly up and down that road. The widening of County Road 30 that goes down to the property, I have to disagree with Commissioner Sharp. It's the county's responsibility to build roads. Those are public right-of-ways. We pay taxes for that. And it's a dead-end road, so it's had minimal attention, and I understand that. We don't have a problem with that. And the applicant is willing to widen to meet the minimum standards that Mr. Haskin asked for. But do not believe that is Mr. Whipple's responsibility to widen it to the public requirements. That's the county's job. You guys are supposed to be doing that, not us. So.
If I could respond, I think my concern is that it's a commercial enterprise, and I agree with you that it is the county's responsibility, but this road is currently private, so I think that makes that. Yep. That's what.
County road's not
told that this extension was private.
That's misrepresentation.
Okay, I misunderstood
Public
that.
road going to a 1,700-foot private driveway.
Okay, because I had written down private road.
No.
So okay.
But it's 114 feet have been deeded to the county, of which only about 60 is used between ditch to ditch. Not even that, probably 40. So this area that's driven on, which is gravel, needed to be widened down towards the entrance drive so that we'd have a 20-foot proper width all the way down, plus the ditches on the side for drainage.
Right. Well, I misunderstood between drive and road. So thank you.
If you have questions about the traffic study, we have our engineer here. We could have you ask them now.
Did you have part of a presentation to summarize that traffic study?
Did not. As I said, the county grilled us on that. We had to provide legal written documentations of how we got there. Mr. Whipple, being a member of Kiowa Creek, for 20 years, he knew what kind of business they were doing. I think he used 1/3 of their business as his startup. We're hoping to get that. I'm hoping it'll grow eventually. But like in all cases, when businesses grow and traffic increases over a long period of time, in this case, it's going to be quite a while. This is not like King Soopers is right there. So over time, it will grow, and that's where the county is going to have to step up and hopefully put that bridge in over that half-mile stretch and finish that road.
We'll wait till you're concluded with your presentation, and then if there are any questions for the traffic engineer, we'll ask those at that time.
Floodplain has been a sensitive item here, and so the care and use of that small, approximate 20-acre area where Mr. Whipple will have in his land, we met with engineering, and the limitations on floodplains is fairly strict. So what we agreed to do was for each of those wooden stands and gun racks, we will take out an equal amount of dead debris. In fact, it's going to benefit Mr. Whipple because he wants to move it up into those areas. So staff's requiring that and now that I look at it, quite frankly, there is only 2 stations down there that would require us to move an equal amount of debris from these areas to offset the 2 shooting stations, because the agreement was if we put in the wooden stands and the gun racks, we would take out an equal amount of dead debris. Because I don't know how to say it, Chuck, but there's only so much allowed down there and you can't add to it. So we agreed to take out to offset what we were adding. These stations, I guess one of them would be down there. So there's 3 out of the 22. The rest of them are up on the hillside area, and those wooden stands and so forth will not be down in the actual lower meadow area. All right. Wildlife endangerment's another item, and I think the applicant has made it very clear that no shots are going to be fired over the property line, so he correctly feels that neither no natural or domestic wildlife will be at risk. Travis Harris is here. We asked him out to look at the property. We drove the property with him, and he surveyed it, and as a representative of Colorado Parks and Wildlife, he indicated that he found no endangered bird nesting present. In fact, we didn't see any birds at all. And we did not see any wildlife down in the meadow area, and we drove, down in this whole area and out into here. So we didn't see wildlife, but I believe what he's going to say is, what I remember him telling us, is that, when you change environment, animals, deer, whatever, are going to initially leave, but they quickly come back. And I'll let him say how often that is, but it's a couple months, if I remember correctly, and he can address that. But they do return, and they adapt, and it's not like they're scared away and left forever. I have spent time at Kiowa Creek myself, and I personally observed, and I was shocked that there were deer and birds within 50 feet of a shooting station. I mean, they didn't care. People were shooting. It didn't bother them. They weren't being attacked. So the sound didn't bother them, and it was a whole lot louder than 55 decibels right where they were. Groundwater containment was an issue brought up by Mr. Wall to the north, and he has concerns that the groundwater would be contaminated in the meadow area by the lead shot. And I think, as we've shown, we actually only have one station here and here down in that northern meadow area, and it's shooting up over the embankment. So there won't really be shot down in that area. This portion over here, yes, there'll be shot out in these 900-foot arcs. from those 4 stations. But that distance is 2,800 feet from Mr. Wall's property, from his home, and it's in a gradient 30 feet lower. So I'm not an expert, but I really don't think the lead is going to flow in any way to cause a problem for him. And I do have something I'm going to read for you in a minute by an expert. These stations 22 and 21 up here are about 1,500 foot away. The property slopes downward and it comes southward away from the property line, which is how this pond gets filled. These are surface drainage ponds. And so everything flows into them as far as surface drainage. So water isn't going to be running uphill towards Mr. Wall's property. I want to read to you an excerpt that was from a paper and a presentation given by the Virginia Tech University Geophysics Department. It was presented November 7th through 10th, 2004 at the Geological Sciences of America Convention in Denver. The paper was presented by Donald Rimstitt, a professor in the Department of Geosciences, Virginia Tech, reported the conclusion of a 5-year study on effects of lead shot and bullets. We're only concerned with our lead shots, but bullets also in the environment. Professor Rimstitt stated in part, we were invited by the U.S. Forest Service to look at the shooting range in the National Forest near Blacksburg, Virginia. This range was 10 years old. And at the time, most of the lead shot had accumulated on about 4 or 5 acres. He went on to say that they looked first at the lead corrosion and whether lead was leaching into the water table or streams. Lead metal is unstable when it is in contact with air and water. It corrodes and it forms something called hydroceracite. That's that white coating that you see on old ammunition in a museum. So when it's in the air or in water, it corrodes, and he's saying that that slows the leaching. However, some lead escapes, but we learned that it is absorbed in the top few inches of soil and does not migrate beyond that. I mean, it doesn't go lower than those few inches. Professor Rimstitt went on to say that lead is not very mobile. It does not wash away in surface or groundwater. Surprising. I thought it did like the rest of you, but I'm sure it may move a foot, but it doesn't wash miles down the road. He stated in the conclusion of the study that shooting on controlled ranges, which is what this application is, a controlled range, reduces the overall risk to the public from lead in the environment. I can provide the contact for that if you wish, but I just pulled out part of it. I read the whole thing, and it was extensive. Additionally, your item number 5 on the approval memorandum, or whatever that's called, the green sheet.
Condition of
approval. Number 5 says that the applicant has agreed to adhere to the United States Environmental Protection Agency's best management practices at outdoor shooting ranges. And I guess we'd have to consider this to be the Bible, put out by the EPA. And the document deals with all kind of manner about lead shot and proper disposal, and whether it's a controlled environmental item like oil in the ground, which they say it's not. And they talked about the first few inches of dirt, and which is then impacted by shotguns. If you're going to clean that up, which we're going to do, or Mr. Whipple's going to do over periods of times, clean that up. You can re-put it back down where it came up from. You can use it anywhere else on the property. If you move it off the property, then it's a regulated, contaminated substance. But for the most part, gun clubs don't do that. They just pull it up, recycle it, a few inches, get the lead out of it, and it goes right back down, and then it's reseeded. The what Mr. Whipple is hoping everybody realizes that document, he's agreeing to that document. And it's going to control what he does for the life of this project. And in that document, which I have a copy of it, it's about that thick, it has all kinds of suggested procedures and also some required procedures. But what it does talk about is coming up with a written program that you're going to follow that outlines how you're going to collect and how often and what you're going to dispose of it. And so how you're just going to control that potential issue of the lead. So it's something every gun club has to do. And we hope that the fact that we're going to abide by the federal law, that would give some comfort to Mr. Wall, who's concerned about this eroding and contamination, which isn't really going to exist. Next item is someone mentioned the fire at a gun club in Brighton, and how it almost burned houses down in the clubhouse and so forth. That incident was a case of a couple teenage boys firing their .22 rifle, small ammunition rifles, at a explosive material called tannerite. Trying to have fun, stand back, shoot at something, watch it explode, and what it did was set a grass fire and almost burned their own house down, and it went across the ridge and headed towards the gun range, and if it weren't for a creek in there, it would have gone on up the hill, but it had nothing to do with the gun club. They were at risk like everybody else out there. Those two boys were the ones that caused that problem. This next item is a sore subject for us. Should say for Mr. Whipple, but I tend to feel for him. He thought all along that he had an agreement. We spent an enormous amount of time working with Tri-County to come up with how this was all going to be managed and dealt with. And he has interviewed, met with, will use a company called Lead Soil Solutions out of Idaho. They do this reclamation of lead shot. That's their business. And they're licensed, certified, and they will be who he will use. And the initial anticipation, because of the limited amount of shooting compared to a 10 or 20-year-old club, is that about the time you get enough lead out there to warrant going through and sifting through and raking, and even EPA says you can pull it up by magnets in some cases. It's going to take 3 to 5 years to reach a density amount enough to have that company be willing to go out there and do that. Because they'll pull the lead out, they then sell it to manufacturers. That money is paid to Mr. Whipple because it's his lead, so to speak. So it's a profit line for his business. He wants to have that out of there. He wants it resold as quickly and as often as possible. But we're anticipating between 3 and 5 years for that to happen. But Lead Soil Solutions will make an annual visit to the site to assess the condition. We're just not going to wait 3 years, but they're going to come out there and check. However, what happened Friday night bothers me because once again, we were given a new demand, this one from Tri-County at 5:27 p.m. You were closed yesterday. We have had no opportunity to sit down and find out what they really want. But the letter that was sent, dated the 12th, they had 30 days to put this letter out, and they waited to the absolute last minute to send it. And the demand is that Mr. Whipple will do a study before he get any permits from anybody. That should have been done in the normal process of this application, so we'd have had a chance to review it and deal with it. Sending it in at the last minute angers me, quite frankly, because he's had his due process rights violated, in my opinion. I'm not an attorney, but I do believe it was inappropriate. They're saying that he needs to, and I'm going to read to you from this letter, he needs to conduct a study on the site to establish range size, soil type, and pH. Keep in mind, we're talking about a huge area. Site topography and stormwater runoff direction. Depth of groundwater. How deep is groundwater out there? Locations of surface water bodies. Location and type of vegetation. Accessibility of shotfall and slug impact. We don't have any slugs. Number of rounds shot. Size of ammunition. you saw what the size is. Shooting direction and patterns. So to make this determination that they want done, if you approve today, that's the next thing they want to happen. He's going to have survey. I'm a real estate developer. I know what it costs to have soil tested. It's $4,000 for 4 borings. It's expensive, and there's going to be a lot more than 4 borings out here to determine where that groundwater is and the condition of the soil. You'll have to do lab tests, water quality tests, hire consultants such as a botanist, geologist, lead remediation specialist, and other people. If this was so important to them, it should have been brought up during the normal process, not at the last minute in the last 30 days. I'm not sure exactly what they want, but if they want this to be done before he is given permits, we're going to respectfully decline to do that. We do not feel it's appropriate, especially because the EPA document that they reference sets forth how to do all of this over the time period that you're open. In the document that they mentioned from the Colorado Department of Health and Environment, I'm going to read you, see if I can find it here, the opening sentence in that document, which they are saying he has to follow. That document says, this document is intended as a plain English guide to give owners and operators of outdoor small arms shooting ranges general guidance for the closure of abandoned ranges. And they pulled word for word out. All those things I read from you were right in that document, and it doesn't even apply to an open range. It's when you're closing them. This is what they want tested and analyzed for. So if they're saying it's got to be done, and that's part of your condition, we're going to decline to do it. It will be done as part of the EPA regulations on an ongoing basis, but should not be a requirement for him to have to meet before he even opens. He doesn't even own the property at that point.
I understand we do have a Tri-County Health Department representative here, so we may ask them some clarifying questions about that. I think we should.
All right, we have one last item, and it's unfortunate that I have to bring this up, but I do think that you need to consider the fact that in the last hearing, Commissioner Sharp gave the public the option of either talking then in their 3-minute window or waiting till today. And most of them decided to talk then instead of waiting to see what the application was all about. But they're virtually all here now. It will be unfair and prejudicial to this applicant if you allow them to have a second 3-minute time window to discuss this application. They had their opportunity in December. Quasi-judicial parameters say 1 3-minute period. We'd like for you to enforce that. So that anybody who spoke last time should not be able to spoke today.
Mr. Hill, would you comment?
Couple points. One, there's no specific statute that identifies these kind of parameters for that. I think it's the board's chair. At the last hearing on December the 12th, Commissioner Sharp specifically asked you if you objected to that procedure, and you said no.
I didn't feel like I could say no. Quite frankly, my client wasn't here. I don't know how he'd feel about it. Yeah, I was in a spot.
You said no.
And at any rate,
so,
they had their say.
Plus, there's new things coming out. I think I just understood that you rearranged the shooting stations since then. So I think it's fair that everyone get an opportunity to comment on the application. That would be my opinion.
Well, we'll accept your decision, but we do object to it.
Continue with your presentation, or are you concluded at this point? Okay. Are there any questions for Mr. Howell at this point? We have
just a couple of questions. One of the things was the open space, the conservancy areas, and the questions about, so if you could put up maybe that mile, the one where you showed the distance from houses and identify the open space area that is conservancy.
I recall the open space is somewhere here, runs up. I think it stops at County Road 30. The conservancy agreement applies to this parcel here largely. And that's a private agreement with the county for private property to give tax write-off. So that's on this side of County Road 30, and then the open spaces to the west over, including the creek.
Okay, and I don't know if there's anybody here from open spaces, but with respect to trails, and so maybe you can just address the distance.
Yeah, I can.
Between.
We did have discussion with them initially, met with them. The trail riding is over to the south here and to the west, or along the creek bed. And it was determined, if I remember correctly, like 2,000 feet away. And the open space people withdrew their objection. And they gave us a go-ahead on this.
Okay. So I have one comment about chairing that December 12th meeting. I also believe that I said that if anything new came up, that people would have the opportunity to testify on anything new that came up at in the difference from the last
And I agree
the 12th and to the meeting today.
I don't think they should be dragging up the old stuff again because they had their say on that. But new, yeah, sure.
Okay, and I believe I said that on the record.
You did.
So the last question I had was really the station that appears to be sort of facing the Walls property, and I know you've reoriented, which I appreciate, and moved a number of these stations. So can you maybe show that again and tell me where the Walls home is and the station that is sort of closest to them and in the direction of their house?
From this intersection of the fence, the Wall property is about 700 feet from here up. It's up on a hill.
Okay.
It'll be 1,537 feet, I think, 1,500 feet to the first station. And the sound decibel was, from that property line down here, was 55.
It kind of looks like, and maybe can't see this well, that station sort of points directly in the direction of their home.
Not really. Their home is farther up here, as I've said, but it does point. This is 900 feet from here to there, and I mean, man, that's probably.
Well, considering that I'm not a good shot.
Yeah.
You know.
Won't be allowed out.
And yeah. Well, I was allowed on another one, so. But anyway, was that one of your considerations as to?
Certainly.
Reorient that one.
It was, and we've also designed this, or Chuck has designed this, so that no shooting is over water. And so you can see that these two have to start here and go around, and then the 900-foot arc is out to here. So it is significant distance away from their property line and from their home.
Okay.
Commissioner Jackson.
Thank you. So I have not participated in this kind of shooting event, and so I'm interested in this cone. When I'm standing, if I were to stand at the shooting station, am I trying to go straight? But sometimes, because I'm not a great shot, it goes into that cone. How is that cone determined?
The cone is determined by the wood shooting station that we showed you earlier. So you're standing in the box, and we tested it as you can swing here and here about a 50-degree angle. That's the most you can shoot at. But these launchers what one would look like. There we go.
Okay.
Those are set at positions around the shooting box, out farther. So some will go along the wall, the ground. Some will be up in the air. They'll be coming from all different directions. We're training, simulating shooting of pheasants and deer.
So it's not always going to be right dead center. It might be over here. It might be over there.
All of them shooting out into that cone area.
Okay.
Where these discs travel.
But the shooter's going to have to figure out where in that cone they're going to shoot.
Has to figure out how to hit the disc in that 50-degree arc in that cone.
Oh, I thought maybe it'd be like always the same place.
No.
I get it. That's part of the game. Okay.
Each station is different.
Okay.
And isn't it true, Mr. Howell, also that shotguns, the pellets do tend to disperse in a wider as they farther away they get.
They spread out and they dissipate and they fall in that 600 to 700 foot range we showed you.
So it's not like one single bullet or slug. It's
a lot of little pellets. Like
numbers of pellets going out and they get a wider arc.
And I have to say that I've actually been shot by those pellets. When I was a teenager hunting with my brother, he shot at a rabbit off of a red tile and it was out in the field and it bounced off and hit me and I got a red welt. And it was close. I was like 20 feet away. So at 900 feet, I mean, it's just kind of fallen to the ground.
Any other questions for Mr. Howell? And next I'll ask for questions for Mr. Whipple. Any other questions for Mr. Howell? Any questions for Mr. Whipple? I have one question for Mr. Whipple, if you wouldn't mind coming back up to the microphone. The property is owned by the Culver Family Trust, is what I heard.
Right.
And so the sale to you is pending the approval of this use.
Yes.
Correct? Correct. All right. That was my only question for Mr. Whipple. No other questions?
One caveat to that. His contract expires tomorrow.
With the Culver Family Trust.
Culver Family Trust. If we get approval here today, then they've agreed to extend. But if it doesn't have any more time on this, they were gracious to grant that extension from last December period. This is it. We need a decision today.
Okay. Thank you. The next, I wanted to ask if there was any commissioners that wanted to ask a question about the traffic study from their traffic engineer. Commissioner Jackson.
Yes, as Commissioner Sharp alluded to earlier, there was a comment about the school bus having to go through buyers, and there would be increased traffic and so on. I'm just wondering, is there any additional information about traffic that we need to know about the increase and the impact on the area? Checking.
The question would be posed to your traffic engineer if they could come forward, and we need your name and address for the record.
Hi, my name is Joe Henderson. I'm a principal with Sustainable Traffic Solutions. The address is 823 West 124th Drive in Westminster.
Thank you. Did you hear Commissioner Jackson's question?
Would you mind restating that, please?
Yeah, actually, now that I know that you're standing in front of us, could you tell us the results of your traffic study and tell us what kind of impact this organization and should we approve it? It will grow and prosper. So what kind of impact would there be in the community and especially on the school bus stops?
Sure. I performed I wrote a letter that's the county defines as a traffic study waiver because the traffic that's going to be generated by this is below the threshold where the county feels that a traffic study is necessary. And typically a traffic study is based on trip generation that comes from a trip generation manual that's published by the Institute of Transportation Engineers. But this is a use that's not defined in that manual. And so the applicant provided information that I used to come up with the trip generation estimate based on his experience at other shooting clubs. And you've probably had a chance to see this, but I'll just put this table out here for you. So I developed this table of trip generation based on the information I got from the applicant. And so the applicant gave me an estimate of the number of customers per week that he expects to see each month. And so you can see that we have the customers per week, and then I've developed from that a daily average. Well, thanks. And so you can see the number of customers per week, and then I estimated the number of customers Monday through Thursday and then Friday through Sunday, and then I came up with a daily average for each day during the different months. And so I believe your question was related to school buses. And the highest numbers are going to be during the summer, or projected to be during the summer. And so lower numbers would be when school buses would be running. And these volumes, so we'd be looking at a weekday, well, I guess Friday, we'd be looking at a range of 6 to 8 in January up to 31 to 41 on a day in May. And these volumes will be spread out throughout the day. We're not anticipating that the traffic for this shooting club would necessarily coincide with the traffic for a typical weekday, which, you know, your morning where you drive to work or come home. So my opinion is that the volumes are pretty sparse. Thank you.
One last question from me. When did you complete your study?
I think the date on that letter is September 8th.
September 8th. So this was done prior to the first scheduled. And was this presented to our county staff?
Yeah.
As part of the application?
They had a chance to look at it, and they had a comment on the original letter, and so the September 8th letter is the second generation of the waiver request.
Thank you very much. Any other questions about traffic? One from Commissioner Conti.
Is there a bus stop in the area? And actually, I mean, where is the closest bus stop to the proposed gun range?
And if you don't know, we can possibly, I'm sure some of the residents that will be coming up to testify would be able to answer that as well. And if you know, please tell us. But if not, we'll pose that question to Mr. Whipple or Mr. Howell. And if they don't know, then we'll wait for residents.
I don't have that answer.
Thank you. Any other questions for traffic, about traffic? No. Thank you very much. At this point, are there any other questions for staff? And I have a list. I'll be opening the public hearing.
The Parks and Wildlife.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate. Parks and Wildlife, could we have you come up? And I'm sure that there are questions for you as well. So do you have a statement you'd like to just let us know about this first?
Sure, thank you. So I'm Travis Harris with Colorado Parks and Wildlife. I'm the local district wildlife manager in Arapahoe County. Thank you for having me today. I will tell you that I have been reached out to by both members of the public and the applicant with concern for wildlife. What I am not is I am not a shooting range expert. I'm not a lead abatement specialist, nor am I a state noise ordinance enforcer. I am the game warden. I'm the wildlife officer or the district wildlife manager. I'm the guy out on the ground. I know this country because I check hunters out there. And so when people call me, the concern is wildlife. Where do we stand with wildlife? Is this a dog even in the fight? And so I wanted to just share a couple of things. My experience with wildlife and shooting ranges is that initially there is a shock period. And with all the noise and, of course, the increase in traffic with people, I'm talking human bodies. And some species of wildlife adapt better than others. But within months, even shorter periods of time, many species will adapt. You'll still see our two big game species of deer, pronghorn and elk. This area there's raptors through there. There's small mammals, coyotes on down, and many passerine or songbirds. And a lot of those birds and mammals will adapt, and you'll still see them through there. I personally have been on shooting ranges and had to wait while animals pass through. So we manage at a population level, I wanted to tell you, of the state. And so we're looking at a small spot here. The species that are intolerant to the development are forced to either, well, they're usually forced to leave. And being that this is along the floodplain, some of those species would remain through the creek itself, the main corridor of Bijou there, West Bijou. With the water, that's something I visited with the applicant. I was concerned about shooting lead shot over water. It's not illegal to go out and shoot over water with lead shot, but it is to hunt waterfowl species, migratory species, geese, mergansers, coots, ducks. Those have to be hunted with non-toxic shot. The reason being that those birds pick up those pellets, end up in their gizzard, and then here comes an eagle or a hawk and eats that duck, and it accumulates lead pellets. That's why it's federally now mandated that to hunt waterfowl, you must use steel shot. So my concern over water was simply for the wildlife on that issue. But overall, the impacts to wildlife would be minimal. The species would adapt, and that's the way it would go, just like other shooting ranges, just like Buckley Air Force Base. Anywhere where there's a lot of noise, you still see wildlife there. With regards to the rabbits, Commissioner Jackson, I've never heard of them going deaf. I don't think that would be, yeah. But I would say that wildlife is not the big dog in this fight, in this issue. You guys have talked about it. It's been brought up. Noise, lead cleanup, distance, safety, school children, the fire, the roadway, Highway 30, and then wildlife. And I'd say that's probably the natural order of things there. I would be happy to answer any questions that you may have, but I wouldn't say that the bunnies or the rabbits are going to be affected in a negative manner. I did not see any prairie dog towns on the property. 15 years ago, I knew the family that lived in this house. I've been on that property with my own boots. I did go out with the applicant to look around the property. I did not see any active or any nesting raptors. It's not to say those birds won't come through. But to go out there and looking for prairie dog town, the issue there was, do we have burrowing owls, which migrate up from the south March to October? Did not see any prairie dog towns. The issue there, I guess, wanted to share is that thank you for inviting me to come out. I know this is controversial. You can feel it in this room, but I'll be happy to help however I can with answering any other questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? If you can remain for the remainder of the hearing, we'd appreciate it.
Yes, thank you.
One question from Commissioner.
It really isn't a question. It's just a comment that hopefully those prairie dogs wouldn't be driven to somebody else's property. That would be the problem.
We'll go that way. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Mr. Howell, and then I'll ask.
Just a reminder that the shooting stations were designed not to shoot at or in or over the water. So there won't be the pellets out there.
Thank you, Mr. Howell. Commissioner Jackson.
Yes, we spoke earlier about having Tri-County before we heard from the citizens.
Thank you. Representative from Tri-County, can you come forward, please? And if you'll state your name and address for the record.
Kathy Boyer from Tri-County, 6162 South Willow Drive, Greenwood Village.
And you are the author of the memorandum that we got dated January 12th.
Some help, yes.
Okay. Thank you. You signed it, so.
Is there a specific question, or should I just...
If you'll just go ahead, and then we'll ask for questions after you're done with your...
The additional comments that were submitted last Friday were made after receiving more information, both at the last hearing and also in speaking with Arapahoe County planning staff and engineering on Friday. We were made aware that they are going to require an operations and maintenance plan for building or operating in the floodplain. So we thought it would be nice to get some of the health concerns, the lead concerns, kind of incorporated into that. It was a recommendation. TCHD recommends that a study be conducted to investigate the following site-specific and range operating conditions And then it goes on to list several things: the size of the range, the soil type and pH, the annual precipitation, and several other things. Those were taken straight from the CDPHE document in a section titled Best Management Practices at Active Ranges. So they do apply to active ranges, not at closing.
And I'm sorry, what was that book again?
It's there are two guidance documents. One is from the EPA and one is from Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment. This one is called Corrective Action at Outdoor Shooting Ranges Guidance Document, and it's linked in the letter.
Thank you.
Commissioner Jackson.
Yeah, a couple of questions. One is, do these regulations apply only for the portions of the property that are in the floodplain?
They are not regulations. It's just a guidance document from the state and from the EPA for operation of any shooting range.
So this is a suggested practices?
Yeah, best management practices. Yes.
Okay, because we do ask them to follow best management. So I guess there's some confusion. Clearly the applicant was not pleased by getting this Friday afternoon. Can you explain why these best practices were not researched earlier in this process and were only presented Friday afternoon? It's a little bit problematic, I think, given all the deadlines and timelines. So not exactly clear, because you did Tri-County was included in the referrals, and so I'm confused.
We did comment the first time when we received the referral before the first hearing, or the hearing that was continued. We comment on limited information. At the time, all we knew is that they were planning to clean up every 3 to 5 years. We really didn't know if that was standard practice or how that amount of time was arrived at. We heard the comments at the last hearing, decided to look at it further. We did have, as the applicant said, the last month, but that was over, holiday period. People take time off and whatnot.
I remain confused. So you knew it was a shooting range. What was it that you learned at the preliminary, whatever it was, the first hearing, that triggered a further research? I don't understand why at the first hearing you didn't say, oh, we need to look into what the criteria are. Why is it that there was something must have triggered why it was that what was the information that you got that was different? Because clearly, well, I don't know if it's clearly, but to my mind, the applicant has tried to meet what the concerns were from that first hearing. So I'm just a little bit still in the dark as to what triggered the additional review.
If I remember the timeline correctly, our water specialist from Tri-County, which is not me, consulted with someone from CDPHE initially, and their information or their takeaway from that conversation was that if they were shooting into the water, it was a concern. Otherwise, it was not a huge concern. That's what we based our first comments on. After the hearing in December, it was clear that the possible lead contamination was a concern of neighbors. And so we thought that maybe we best look into it a little bit more to address those concerns.
And it looks like you have a coworker that would like to address. Please state your name and address for the record, please.
Sheila Lynch with Tri-County Health Department, 6162 South Willow Drive, Greenwood Village. I was just going to add, too, that we brought the best management practice documents to staff and to the applicant. So those were brought forward. I think what we realized is that perhaps it would be helpful for us to kind of draw out certain pieces of that to clarify some of the things that we wanted addressed.
Question from Commissioner Conti.
Is there any concern? Obviously, some pictures. When I was looking at some of these documents in our board summary report yesterday, there was pictures that had been submitted of a very, obviously the 100-year flood happened at one point in time or another, and the area, and obviously happening and flooding out. Is there any concern that the lead that would be out there waiting for that 3 to 5 year period, spring comes along, torrential rains happen, that this could flow into that stream bed and cause any kind of lead contamination?
That's the reason really that we listed out those site-specific conditions. It's hard to say that even the guidance documents, they list all of those areas that differ from property to property. I would say yes, there is a concern, or we wouldn't have brought it up. How much of a concern is it? I don't know. That's what the study that we requested would tell you.
Any other questions for Tri-County Health Department? Commissioner Jackson.
Sorry to beat this, but I appreciate I'm sorry, I've forgotten your name already, but appreciate what you say, that you had actually already submitted it, but you thought you'd clarify it. But again, it's the Friday afternoon that I think is the troubling piece. Maybe not even what's in it so much as the timing of it. And so that's the piece I think I don't understand. Is why did you do it last week?
No, I can appreciate that. I think part of it was with limited information that we were receiving about what the maintenance plan or operations plan was, and it would have been a little bit easier for us to respond and give some more specifics. And so, in consultation with staff on Friday, they had mentioned that they are requiring an operation and maintenance plan for the floodplain, and so we thought, well, if we could address health through that might be the best way. So you're right, it did come in late. I think part of it was just that those conversations spurred some more specifics on how to handle it.
Commissioner Conti.
Just for clarification, so you're saying that maybe what delayed this whole thing and that delayed the letter was the fact that the meeting that was set up with the public works staff was not scheduled until the 12th. Is that what I'm hearing?
So I think part of it was the evolution of how to respond and prepare for today. And so we had said that, we're preparing for this hearing so we can answer some questions. And, in hindsight, maybe we didn't need to put it in writing. Perhaps could have just shared it today, because our thought was we really wanted to be best prepared based on the testimony that we had heard and some of the communication that had been submitted since the last hearing.
What I'm hearing, maybe you can clarify with this, is that this was addressed to Jason Reynolds, possibly as a recommendation for their operations and maintenance plan, not specifically that the applicant requirement that the applicant, these are recommendations for the operations and maintenance plan yet to be created by the Public Works Department staff. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Commissioner Sharp.
Thank you. That was kind of my clarification here, is that if this is a requirement, that it doesn't have to be completed prior to approval or making a decision on this. Because my question is, if something came out of the study, which is sort of to your point, something came out of the study, would that delay a decision? I mean, and I think that's one of the things in here that says the applicant shall, wait a minute, let me go back here. The applicant shall adhere to the Environmental Protection Agency's best management practices for lead at outdoor shooting ranges. Mm-hmm. And so I guess my question is, if for some, that looks like that's sort of proactive, that they will adhere to those things. But I think my question is, if something is discovered in a study and a decision has already been made, then the applicant would have gone ahead in good faith and purchased property that, maybe would, it just puts this in a difficult position if there's anything in here that would have changed the decision that this board made any difference to the decision that this board is going to make, hopefully today.
Any other questions pertaining to the letter or Tri-County Health Department? Then I'm going to ask Jason Reynolds to come up as the staff member and talk a little bit about what you said at the beginning about the Tri-County Health Department letter. I believe you said that one of the conditions of approval actually would encompass what this letter is. Commissioner Conti first.
Yeah, quick question here. I'm just curious if our ladies from Tri-County feel, as of today and hearing what the applicant had to say, if they still feel, obviously this letter was dated prior to our testimony here today. After hearing what they've done to try to mitigate noise levels, to try to reduce those, do you still feel that this is necessary before they purchase or begin?
We're talking about the noise part of the letter now?
Yeah.
It sounds like they've done the noise study already, which is what we were recommending they do.
Mm-hmm.
I have not seen the study, so I can't speak to what they have proposed. The new locations of the stations, the first time we saw them was today. So I really can't say whether that's, sufficient or not, but it looks like they did already do the study.
Thank you. Mr. Howell, did you have any, just address those issues?
This is the EPA manual that we've been talking about, very lengthy. It deals with best management practices, BMP. And in this document, back in the back on page 18 of chapter 3, it says that these best management practices for lead can be phased in over time, and therefore that assumes the business is open and operating. So we have a clean field out here, no contamination of any type. And it'll stay pristine, it'll stay the way it is, unless the business is put in place and conducted. What we thought, we had an agreement with Tri-County on, was that on an ongoing basis, after it opened, there was going to be this plan dealing with the area in the floodplain, which we've established in the pictures is a very small area now compared to what it used to be. And as the operation moves along, he has to follow the recommendations. The recommendations say, at some point in time, test the ground, test the pH level, test the water. Do things like keep a logbook. Specifically says keep written records as you move forward. It doesn't say you have to do these things beforehand, and that's what we're objecting to. We're going to do them after being open and while he's open, but to have to go forth and do that kind of a study at that expense as a condition to getting approval is unfair. It should have been brought up long before now.
Thank you, Mr. Howell. Jason Reynolds, please. Just wanted you to repeat, because we've heard a lot of testimony between the time you opened up the public hearing with your presentation, and tell us a little bit more about the Tri-County Health Department letter.
Well, the Tri-County Health Department letter clarifies some of the things that Tri-County Health would like to know about the background of the site in order to better implement the EPA recommendations. And staff believes that that can be tied to the operations plan that Public Works engineering staff is requiring prior to development in the floodplain.
And the operations and maintenance plan would be a condition, which one of the numbered conditions?
Number one conditions covers that. Prior to final copy of these plans, they must address Public Works staff comments and concerns as identified during the review. And if The commissioners refer to the engineering services staff report, which was included in the board summary report written by Chuck Haskins. Item number 4 in there in the engineering staff report discusses the operations plan.
Thank you. Any questions for Jason or any other staff? Commissioner Sharp.
I guess I'm still not totally clear on time frames here. So, and the best practices, I haven't read that EPA document. So, is this looking for a study that's a baseline, or is it, which has to be done before any opening of the, or did I hear you say this can be done, if this were to be approved, this could be done at the same time that the club was being started and everything? You know, are there things, I just don't know how long. Are they going to take months, or are they going to take a couple of days to do the couple of things that are addressed in Public Works comments?
And I'm less familiar with the requirements of a floodplain management permit, but we'd require them to do that sort of as they're working through the floodplain management permit process, which engineering staff would participate in, and we could also involve Tri-County Health in that floodplain management permit. So before they do anything in the floodplain, they would be required to receive a floodplain management permit from the county. So before operations commence.
And they do understand exactly what would be required. The applicant, no, there's not clarity on what would be required during that. I think that's important to make sure that the applicant understands what would be required for them to do. I'm assuming that the best practices would be put in place, but it's really important to know what those are and what the time frames are and what the cost is, you know, to doing those things. So I think there has to be some clarity on that. I don't want to drag this on because I'm very sensitive to the fact that we've been here for quite some time and we haven't heard from citizens yet. So
certainly, I can't address that immediately, but I can, check with Chuck Haskins with engineering, perhaps bring something back after the public.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Howell, one last comment before I open up for citizen comment.
We did understand we had to do the floodplain plan as part of how property would be operated. Nowhere until the last minute were we told you have to do all this testing to establish a baseline. The EPA's document does not require that. It's an ongoing thing to be monitored afterwards. So we will put a plan in place. We'll agree to those conditions on a going forward basis, but not to have to spend the money. You give an approval. Now we got to go do all this. They don't like the results. We don't have any approval. We don't have any right to open. So it's left in the hands of somebody. I'm not an expert. He's not an expert. Tri-County's not an expert. They didn't even understand some of these things were there until the last minute. So as long as we don't have to do it before we get the permit, we're agreeing to create those things on an ongoing basis afterwards.
Thank you, Mr.
They open.
Quick question. Why, when you did your noise study, did you not automatically forward the report of that noise study to Public Works and to Tri-County, knowing that was one of the hugest concerns from the citizens?
I don't have a reason for it. The holidays, all that kind of stuff. I didn't get it until 9th, 10th, or 11th, I think, is when we got it. And I've worked many hours over the last 4 days to put this whole thing together. So this was the lack of timing, I guess, because everything came down to the last minute. I guess somewhat like they're saying too. But ours was a positive thing. What the study created was a benefit to everybody. Theirs is, if it's a demand for that to be done beforehand, it's a very expensive thing that we should have known about a long time ago.
Commissioner Conti.
Do you have any idea, would the sound study that you've already conducted satisfy what they're asking for?
Yeah, sound study should meet all those conditions and better.
And better.
Yes.
how long would it take for them to peruse through your sound study and make sure that it met the criteria that they're asking?
It's a 17-page document, you said.
Maybe they could start in those 5 to 10 minutes.
All right, we're going to, in the interest of time, we're going to open up for public comments. I have a list for people that have signed up, and I'm going to use these documents initially, and then at the end I will ask if there's anyone else that has any comments. So I'm opening up the public comment period. I have first name is Paul Howard. So you've had your chance. I mean, that's, you may have more. Next name that I have on my list is Dustin Wager, who has said that he's for the USR and would like to speak. Please come forward. And I'd ask you to state your name, and this goes for all speakers today, please. State your name and address for the record, and then watch the 2 little lights up here right in front of me. The yellow light will go on when you have 30 seconds left, and then the red light will come on when you have to conclude. You have 3 minutes. Welcome, and state your name and address, please.
Dustin Wager, 3386 Willow Nook Ranch Trail, Elizabeth, Colorado. I'm here, I believe that this helps with everything moving forward. You know, population growth, everything. This is going to help with giving people a place to go that's not on public land, because I think there's more, concern with people just walking out into the mountains, wherever, just thinking they can shoot, or even going on to people's private land to do this. This gives them a avenue to go. It's obviously going to be regulated, and the concerns, as far as real estate wise, there are tons of things that could be worse. Motorcycles, I know that's a big concern. What if somebody wants to open that up? There are, like I said, I think the benefits for the community out there, helping restaurants, everything like that can really be a positive for what Mr. Whipple's trying to do. I guess that's all I have right now.
Thank you, Ms. Rager. Appreciate your comments. The next one on my list is Tim Hasenbalg. And not speak. Okay, but you put down that you're against. Okay. I've got 3 sheets here, sorry. Okay, the next name on the list that signed up, Danny Upton. Is Danny Upton here? Please come forward and state your name and address for the record.
Danny Upton, 2011 Basil Street, Strasburg, Colorado. In the interest of being repetitive so that we can get through more people, I'm just want to say that I am for it and don't need to be repetitive. So,
thank you, Mr. Upton. And I'll just go ahead and say that too for anyone. If you testified previously on this case in the last, we're looking for your comments on anything new that you've heard today or that you didn't discuss last time. So the next name I have is Teresa Cavender. Said no, does not want to speak, but is against. Is that correct? The next name I have is Larry Cavender, does not want to speak, but is against. Correct? Brenda Bunner wants to speak and is against. Brenda? Please state your name and address for the record and be mindful of the lights.
My name is Brenda Bunner, 4640 South County Road 181, Byers. And I have some documents for you guys. How do I get them to you?
Through Ms. Sanchez there. And you can adjust the mic to your, there you go.
In regards to Tri-Valley giving late notification.
Tri-County Health Department.
Tri-County, I'm sorry. There was a lot of holidays, like they said, and I checked with
Mr. Haskins on Friday to see if the applicant had responded about widening the road, and there was no response from him. So as far as late stuff, it goes both ways. And on the widening of Road 30, why would the county make allowances for this commercial site when they have made, there's a church in Strasburg, there's a subdivision in Strasburg, had to bring the roads up to code. I think both of those are paved. So, why would this one be 22 feet instead of the 24 standard required? And I do have a quote on pricing, which is in that paperwork. That paperwork also contains some excerpts from the corrective action for outdoor shooting ranges regarding the lead and other debris. The Byers Fire Department responded with no comment because Byers does not have a fire code. The fire code will have to be Arapahoe County's regulation. And there's I think there's an email in there about that. And there is one from Mr. Terrell at the school regarding his worry about the traffic. I do have a map here. I hope it will work. This area right here is the shooting area, and I do not have the current station array because I did not review it. But the circles show. The circles show the sound of half mile.
I'm picking her up. Ma'am, excuse me, please, you need to speak into the microphone. We're not picking you up at all. Thank you.
Right. My home is right here. That's a little bit for you guys. Thank you. And any shooting that's done down on the creek over in that area echoes off my house like a hammer. So as far as their decibel determination or their sound study, I think there needs to be another one. There's some decibel information in there on how it goes down 6 decibels for doubling of distance. And I did like a 660. I did a half mile, a mile, and that's all in there. And as far as notification of the people, Mr. Alpers, here are the envelopes he received. 22nd of December, when the hearing was on the 12th, that's like 2 weeks for us to prepare. And I'm not adjoining property, so I didn't even receive one. And the sign is at a dead end, so nobody knew about it. And that's what I talked to Jan about, is making it more visible.
Red lights on it.
Mostly in general, it's just with other clubs in the area, it's not needed and it's not safe.
Thank you, Ms. Bunner. When we get all through, right now it's public comment, so please make notes and then we'll allow you a chance to respond. Kelly Jokes? Okay. You're against, but did not want to speak. Cecil Elpers also said against and did not want to speak. Ian Patrick, you were so you had your chance, but may need you again. Ronald Hassenbalg, or did you sign in on 2 times? No, there was Tim Hassenbalg. Ronald Hassenbalg. Okay. No speaking, but against. Rachel Lee. Okay. And you said you did not want to speak, but are against. If you can come down and state your name and address for the record.
My name is Rachel Lai. I live at 954 South County Road 181. Speaking to the decibel and the sound, I live 3 miles away, and I want to let you know that I can clearly hear shots coming from that direction. There was test shots done that we did ourselves where we all stood outside to hear them, and I could hear them clearly. So to speak that we won't be disturbed, I think is not true. I like to enjoy the outside. I like to be out on my property. I don't want to hear 100 gunshots every day, 6 days a week. It's just disruptive. So.
Thank you. Going to the last sheet, Mr. Whipple signed in. Tom Davil did not mark whether he wanted to speak or not. Tom Davil? Okay, I'm sorry, Davey. No speaking. And is in favor of this. Both, well, of course, the applicant's in favor. Tom Davey, you were signed in saying that you were for the applicant. Dan Culver did not say whether they wanted to speak, but signed up for. Can I ask a question? Is that from the Culver Family Trust? Okay. Rhonda Wager. Okay. Jerry Walls. And you have a number of family members here. But first of all, please state your name and address for the record.
Gary Walls, and it's 3601 County Road 181. And that's not our residence. That's where we own.
Okay.
70-some acres right adjacent. I have a question for Travis at the DOW.
All your testimony has to be to us, and then
if he can tell you guys the normal shot size on an upland game bird.
Oh, for Travis okay. We'll just make a note of that, and we'll ask you to come up and address that question. So you don't use more of your time, your 3 minutes.
Yeah, I had a lot of it, but they changed the deal, and we were never aware of it. We live right next door, and they stated that they sent letters to everybody. We never received a letter, and we have 2 lots that are right adjacent. Their upland game deal is right next to our property. There was no decibel sound deal done from where they're hunting the upland game birds. The school bus drives right up 181 and stops all the way. There's probably a stop a quarter mile from where the gun range is. That clears up anything. They state existing homes, and there's nothing in there for future homes. We have 2 lots there that we're going to build spec houses on if this don't go through. If it does go through, then the revenue from the county, they lose because nobody will buy them. Nobody, and they can't say that the home values, they don't know because it's common sense. They're going to go down. Period. The animals may get used to the noise. I'm curious what Travis will say if it dulls their senses. They get used to it. And then I think if they can correct me if I'm wrong, if they approve this, if they want to add a rifle or pistol range in later, they don't need your approval. So I think they can just, if it's a shooting range, they can just go ahead and implement it in there.
I'm being told by legal counsel that they would have to ask for
to
change that.
All right. As far as Kale and Heather's house being next to it and above it, their ground extends into the creek bottom, which flows down into theirs. It doesn't flow, water don't flow up. Their house is on a hill. They're on a well. So groundwater is what they're concerned about with the lead. And I don't know if we're really concerned about it leaching downward downriver as to leaching down into the ground. I don't know if they've done a survey on how deep the water is, but it's probably not very deep right in there.
The red light has come on, so if there's other members of your...
I have a question, though. You got a red light for us, and they can talk as long as they want.
They're the applicant, yes, and this is just the rules, the public. Right, but you have other members of your family here that I'll go down. So if there's any points that you particularly wanted to make, please make sure they cover that. I have Lindsay Walls.
Hello, my name is Lindsay Walls, 3601, 181, and I'll be brief. First and foremost, our concern is the safety. They can say all they want that they're going to check the shot that these people are going to be shooting, but he himself said, you can't always guarantee what they're going to be shooting, which way they're going to be shooting. They can say, shoot this way, but in the heat of the moment, they can shoot anywhere. And the station is going directly to my children's house, one of those, so, you can't guarantee what's going to be happening. It takes one shot. As far as the land values, there's no criteria for Elbert County to study that, but the impact is common sense. It's going to make the land values go down. Who's going to choose to buy a house directly next to a shooting range? If this does pass, my kids are going to have to sell their house. They're not going to stay next to a place where safety is a concern. Who's going to buy their house? It's going to be devastating for them because they're not going to be able to sell it. So anyways, I just hope that you guys consider the amount of negativity for the community, instead of one person's gain. Thank you.
Thank you. Next person is it Kyle? Okay. Okay. Heather Walls is against and wanted to speak.
Heather Walls, my address is 3601 South County Road, 181, directly north of the proposed site. We were not aware of the new site proposal. He did not provide any of that. We called and checked with Jason multiple times, as well as Brenda did. So that's all new information to us. But with the shift of it, it's directly shooting at my bedroom window. When they were out conducting their noise study, I could see them clearly. I probably could have had a conversation with them. They could have come and tested those noise levels on my deck. I was home. But I do have a question for Travis with the DOW that I'd like him to address. While I was studying the EPA manual for best practice management, which Mr. Whipple referred to as his Bible that he will follow 100%. On Chapter 1, page 9, the Clean Water Act states that waters of the United States or navigable waters of the United States are waters of the United States, including territorial seas that include any body of water that is connected to or impact on interstate waterways. The waterways may include lakes, ponds, rivers, streams, wetlands, or even guts of frequently dry area. So I'd like Travis to say, what would you classify Bijou Creek as? Is it a wetland?
He'll be able to address those questions when we're done with citizens' comment.
Okay. I'd like him to address that because in that exact same area, it says that the Clean Water Act prohibits the discharge of any pollutant by any person into the waters of the United States without a national pollutant discharge and elimination systems permit. And I don't think that permit has been obtained or even looked into. So that part of the EPA has been completely overlooked, and that needs to be looked into because he is going to be polluting it, regardless of if he does the best management practices. I also have concerns with the lead mitigation. I'm not an expert on it. I did some research as a person not in that field, but they dig up 6 inches of ground in order to mitigate all that lead, how are they going to navigate around tree roots? They're going to end up killing that entire river bottom by trying to mitigate that lead around there, digging 6 inches down. There's no way around it. If there's a root, are you just going to walk away from it and say, oops, that lead's just going to be left there for 3, 5, 10 years? And I'd also like to know exactly what the measurement of those decibels at our house was, because they neglected to say what those measurements were north. They did state that on the south line of the property they're 55 decibels, but they didn't state exactly what it was on my fence line. I sent you guys a video. I hope you guys were able to open it and view it. My husband stood right where that same microphone stood, because I watched them place that microphone while I was at home working, and you guys heard what it was. That was not 55 decibels. So I'm not quite sure what type of noise study they did. The applicant did it. I don't know if it was swaying his way, but I think that an independent study needs to be done to clarify a little bit more of those details.
I need you to wrap up when you can.
Okay. And I just both of you say no. I've been standing out there with my daughter, reading your guys' mission statement. First 5 lines are to improve quality of life. That's your guys' mission statement. That's what you guys do. And if you vote yes, you're severely dequalifying many people's lives. As you can see, this is the second day we've taken off work to come talk to you. So I think you should take that into consideration.
Thank you, Ms. Walls.
Thank you.
Next person on the list is Evan Hasselbog. Did not want to speak but is against. Ann Hasselbog said maybe want to speak and is against. You'll have 3 minutes. Please state your name and address for the record, please.
Ann Hassenbaugh, 64115 East County Road 34, Byers, Colorado. And we're at the 47 decibel level, from what I understand. And I'm not going to go against what they have to say that way, but we've lived out there my husband's lived out there going on 7 decades. And I don't care. It just makes me so angry that someone could come in and destroy our peace and quiet. And I don't care how many decibels when you come down to it. It is shotgun blasts 6 days a week, 12 hours a day or whatever it is, destroys our peace and quality of life and for the neighbors around. And it does carry. And it makes a huge difference. And gosh darn it, we were there first. I have nothing against shotguns or any of that kind of stuff, but by gosh, we can see their property and we can hear what goes on, especially gun blasts. It's bad enough in dove season. And it's just not right. And it's our peace for their profit. Thank you.
Thank you. And the last speaker I have is Tim Wolf. Said maybe want to address and is against. Tim Wolf. If you'll state your name and address for the record, please.
Tim Wolf, 49315 East 88th Avenue. When this whole discussion came out, I had people from both sides hating me because of it. I'm an NRA certified shotgun instructor, as a matter of fact. Things that have been brought up, due process. I absolutely understand due process, but I also understand due diligence. So we're going to take one, we're going to take the other. If due process hasn't been served, neither has due diligence. These questions, this gentleman is a master class shooter. He shoots at many of the clubs I shoot at. He knows what's necessary. Why was that not brought up? As far as, I know that he had the gentleman come out and revamp his stations. Very knowledgeable, very safe. I will absolutely say that. One of the people had asked me, are you for or against this? I'm for shooting clubs. I coach a youth shotgun team, competitive shooters. Absolutely for shooting. If this club goes through, will my kids shoot there? Absolutely. What I'm not for is the fact of the way this has been done. This has been done underhanded. People were not addressed. Due diligence wasn't taken. One of the things, and we all have our opinions, the decibel test. Nobody runs their blender all day, 7 days a week. As a shooter, well, as most of my kids do, they reload their own shells. Yes, 7.5 is the largest shot you can use. I can run 1,550 feet per second. Odds are they used the lowest ram equivalency, which is 1,150, maybe 1,200 feet per second. What's the difference in that? Now, at 7.5 at 1,650 feet per second, is that 900 feet actually legitimate? I have a grandfather that lost his eye that was over a quarter of a mile off from shot raining down. Now with the stations being set where they're at, I believe that may have been addressed. I really do. I respect the gentleman who set up the stations. So the information that you heard may or may not have projected the worst case scenario. That cute little bottle of shot is probably 7/8 of an ounce or 1 ounce. I did quick math for you. 250 shooters shooting one time, 100 shots per shooter. They shoot 7.375 pounds of lead per time they shoot. That one time over those 250 shooters is 1,843 3/4 pounds of lead that is actually going into the ground. Now, we're talking about 250 shooters one time. How many times are they going to go shoot? My kids shoot, on average, 2 to 3 times a week. So run those numbers by and see how much lead has acclimated. I'm trying to get through this thing. The one thing that really does bother me, and this is the honest to God truth, I don't live near this thing. I'm an advocate of shooting, but I don't like the way they did this. This board has to make a decision based on one man's desire versus the needs of an entire community. What has more weight in your county? And it needs to be looked at that way. It really does.
Thank you, Mr. Wolf. So those are that was my list of people that signed up to speak. Is there anyone else in the audience, citizen wanting to be heard on this matter? Could you come forward? Please state your name and address for the record.
Yes, Cecil Welpers, 54783 East Wolf Creek Drive, and I represent my mother and father's estate. And on that map, it shows there Elpers. That section, half section, is what they have, is subdivided. If we were to add a road in there, we would have to bring it up to county standards with material, everything. And on the north side there, County Road 30, which is marked by a green sign, a maintainer does go up and down there. Yes, the county does do that. The width and the road conditions, they shrink and they deteriorate. So why should, and as a business, shouldn't he, if we have to bring our road up to county standards, shouldn't he have to do the same from the entrance up to 181?
Thank you, Mr. Albers. Are there any other citizens? Please come forward and state your name and address for the record. Did you sign up to speak? I didn't, but I did. Okay. What's your name? Got it.
3601 South County Road, 181. I'm the neighbor. And I just had one thing. He said he's going to use biodegradable targets. And biodegradable targets are made from sulfur. So what that means is they hit the ground, nothing's going to grow. When that sulfur leaches into your soil, it's going to kill the plants and nothing's going to blow. I've been to those shooting ranges before. And if you have a pile of them there, they kill the grass. There's going to be nothing for the animals to eat. I mean, that's not a big deal, but do you want to kill all the grass around? And that's all I have to say about it. And even the targets, it eats away the metal on the throwers, those biodegradable targets. So I just wanted to let you guys know about that.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Are there any other citizen comments? If not, I'm going to close the public hearing, the citizen comment period, and I'm going to ask Travis to come forward because there were a couple of questions that were specifically asked of you, and then we'll have the applicant address any of those comments to.
Thank you, Commissioner Baker. Yes, there were 3 questions. I appreciate all of them. They're valid questions, all of them. Mr. Walls asked if the sound dulls the senses of wildlife. I cannot stand here and tell you that it does not. Okay, I think there definitely are impacts, but the nature or the extent, is it detrimental? Again, some species are more tolerant than others, but there's definitely an impact from, a wildlife point of view, or else they wouldn't leave, right? Right. Also, Mrs. Walls asked a question. She said, what kind of a waterway would it be? West Bijou Creek is a creek. It is considered an intermittent stream, a waterway of the U.S. And then with regards to the shot or the chill, which is the size of the pellet, Mr. Walls asked, and is a valid question. I don't think he's asking about doves. Most people shoot 8 and 7.5 shot for doves, which is what people also shoot clay pigeons with. But in the uplands where they're going to be hunting chukars, pheasants, that type of thing is usually hunted with larger pellets, typically 6, 5, and 4. With shotgun pellets, as the number gets smaller, the size gets bigger. Valid questions all. Hopefully that answers. Thank you.
Any questions from the commissioners for Travis? Okay. Thank you very much. Were there any other questions for staff at this point? I'm going to ask that we be allowed to take a quick break for me to consult with legal counsel and then maybe also for biological needs. And we'll be back within no more than 10 minutes. It's for executive session. So do I need a motion for that? Moved by Commissioner Jackson and seconded by Commissioner Sharp.
I need a specific.
Sorry.
I hereby move to go into executive session pursuant to CRS 24-6-402, paren 4, paren B, for legal advice on the board's options and authority in approving or denying the application for use by special review in planning case number U17-004. Second.
The motion was made by Commissioner Jackson and seconded by Commissioner Sharp. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
We're in recess. Yes. First restroom. All right, we're still recording. I would entertain a motion to return from executive session.
I so move. Second.
Moved by Commissioner Holland and seconded by Commissioner Sharp. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, when we had left, we had just finished hearing citizen comment, and we had also heard from the Colorado game warden from Travis, and I want to give the applicant one last chance to address any of those comments that you had heard from the citizens.
Thank you, Chairman. Try and get these in order. Brenda Bunner talked about the road widening, and that as of Friday, that Chuck Haskins had no knowledge of whether we had agreed to do this or not. And in fact, I did send one yesterday to, not to him, but to the staff contact that I worked through. So they have the official notification, but we had a meeting with them, and then there was a series of emails that went back and forth. And the one that I sent, and I'm sure Chuck he probably didn't remember it, but he can find it. December 22nd, I had asked him to describe what it was he wanted us to do, which was the 20-foot minimum width. And I wrote back and said, Chuck, this is exactly what we needed and what we talked about in the meeting. Thank you. We hope to have the estimated cost squared away before the end of the year to allow Mr. Whipple response in the affirmative. And I had told staff member Jason. I had told Jason in a phone call on Friday that he was doing that. So we did tell them we were going to do it beforehand. She mentioned something about a sound test, and I didn't hear it and didn't understand it. If she could reiterate that, then we could have our...
Who was the person?
Was Brenda Bunner. She did her own sound test of some type, and I didn't really understand what she was saying. But it seems like our person ought to address it if we knew what it was. Maybe we hold that one?
I think we'll hold on that one. And
okay. Notices were sent out per code. We signed a notarized affidavit of doing it. I did it myself, so I know that those letters went out. In all cases, if I said it was mailed, it was mailed. And it was mailed to the addresses that were provided by the county records. No, I can't say why they didn't get them if they didn't get them. Jerry Walls talked about never received a letter. I guess that's my answer. We certified the affirmation that everything went out, so sorry he didn't get whatever he's talking about. His idea about building future homes, I guess he didn't say when he was planning to do that. Maybe it's many, many years off in the future. Don't know. There isn't anything, a record that I know of in the county where he started that process. So it's just an idea that he wants to proceed and do. We talked about value. We do have I wasn't aware of this, but we do have one of the people who signed up who's a residential broker who has sold and bought, handled properties out there for 17 years. And I would like her, Rhonda Wager, to come up and give you just a brief
She's
comment.
Signed in on the...
She signed in, yes.
Okay.
Well, we finished public comment.
I'm sorry, we're finished with public comment. But if the applicant has another member of his staff that can address questions that a citizen asked, or even I think Commissioner Conti asked, I don't believe that we've heard testimony yet today about whether or not the value of houses can be forecast based on the proximity of a. So I'm just raising this as an issue among us as to whether. That was a question that was previously asked before.
Yeah, a couple times.
And so did Commissioner Conti. Go through all of yours, and then we'll ask her to come forward and give her name and address.
Okay. There was a comment about the groundwater well serving the Walls property. Nobody knows what level that's at, but it would be. May not be 100 feet, might be 30 feet. But the point was that study conducted by Virginia Tech indicated that lead sits in the first 3-4 inches. It doesn't go below that. It doesn't contaminate the ground below that. Lizzie Walls commented on the control of shooting angles. I mentioned earlier, those wood stations that the shooters must stand in limit the angle of the gun by the 4x4 posts. At 50 degrees it's very common, it's very typical, that's what they're used to. But most importantly, the launchers are going to be sending those clays out into that zone, not off on that side. So they're not going to shoot way over here and be outside the zone. It's within the zone where the normal shooting is handled. Heather Walls talked about contaminating Bijou Creek. That is more than 2,000 feet away. It's a 6-foot wide creek generally. I mean, I've been out there and looked at it from the bridge. We're not shooting towards it. There isn't any shot ever going to end up out there. It's not going to be contaminated. She talked about killing stuff in the riverbed. That's the same thing. It's just not going to happen. And the decibel rating for her house, we said, and we showed on the plan where it was 55 decibels, which is this below the state limit. That is 1,500 feet away from her house. So up there, she's going to hear probably 45. I mean, something less. It's a long way away. Tim Wolf commented about how we were very, very underhanded in this whole approach, and I beg to differ, obviously. The county has a certain procedure, regulations, code. We were told what those were. We followed that to the letter, answered every question, dealt with every issue. We did everything that we were asked to do by code. I don't think you can ask any more than that from somebody. Mr. Elper said something. Well, I don't know. But there was another comment about the road, and as we've said before, County Road 30 is a dead-end street. It services one property. There might be a gate for a tractor, I don't know, alongside, but the regular traffic is that one location. And the right-of-way has already been given to the county, 114 feet. So if and when the county decides to put the bridge across the creek and build that about a half-mile area, then it will be brought up to the proper standards. That's what the county regs would take care of. For our intents and purposes, the county engineer has said, we widen this to 20 feet. That'll be enough to service emergency vehicles and two-way traffic, and that's what we've agreed to do. We haven't agreed to do anything wider than that. Mr. Cale Wall talked about the shot, and in this flyer that I offered earlier, it says, constructed contains non-toxic materials that will be biodegradable at least 95% within 2 years. So I don't think it's got sulfur in it, but if it does, it's non-toxic, not going to kill weeds and grass. The last thing, other than those two open issues, I would like would be for Mr. Whipple to come up and talk about the hunting in the upland area with the larger shot.
Thank you. There was a couple of comments about the shot. We use brand new Remington 1,200 feet per second, ounce and an eighth, 7.5 shot for our test. That is the most common shot that is probably shot out at the sporting clays clubs. He made it out there was 1,500 feet, and you could make them as fast as you want. But the most common stuff that's bought off the shelf is about 1,500 feet. And they do sell it at 1,200 feet per second shells is what I'm trying to say. They also sell it at 1,250. As far as the hunting shells, the number 5 does fly a little bit further, but as according to the chart, it's still under 900 feet on two different charts that we've pulled up for the distance on a hunting load. Okay?
Thank you, Mr. Webb.
I had two open items, and I'll close one. I'm just simply say the sound test that Brendan Bunner performed is obviously not professionally done. Where we hired a person whose company does this regularly. They use the proper calibrated equipment, very accurate determinations. And I don't remember what she said, but I would say ours would supersede that. Last open issue would be Rhonda Wagner as an expert addressing the values of housing.
Rhonda Wagner as one of
our people.
Okay. Rhonda, please come forward and state your name and address for the record. And in the interest of time, please, our question was specifically concerning any studies showing the property value of properties around, whether they go up, go down, around gun ranges.
What I can speak to...
Name and address first.
Rhonda Wager, 7471 Clinton Street, Littleton. I can tell you that housing values around good developments, well planned out, well regulated, whether it be commercial or subdivisions, you will see those all over the state of Colorado rise, okay? If it's well done, which I think has been clearly demonstrated today, that's what we're after here. I mean, that property will be sold and something will happen to that property. That's a given. So we might as well do something right around it. So that's what I can speak to. And quite possibly what happens is your value goes up around something that may be deemed commercial, even though it's really not commercial, that instead of selling something by the acre, you now can sell it by the square foot if you put something commercial beside it. Okay? So I believe that something done this way would enhance the values around it.
Thank you, Rhonda.
You could address the fact she's sold property out there for 17 years.
Yes, yeah. 17 years I'm with Remax Masters in Greenwood Village.
Commissioner Sharp.
Excuse me. Do you have any direct experience, though, with properties by a shooting range?
Specifically?
Because there are wonderful properties out there, but most of them are not by a shooting club.
The property values, if you look at them around shooting ranges, they do not, as a percentage, fall off just because they're around a shooting range. Now, keep in mind, what I'm saying is if it's a good one, if it's a nice one, if it's something regulated properly, your property values will go up. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Rhonda?
Okay. One last 10-word comment. I've been a broker for 43 years, and pricing is dependent upon supply and demand. And as people move out of Denver to the east, and there's more demand for housing out there, those values are going to go up. We ask you for an approval of this application.
Thank you, Mr. Howell. Commissioner Conti, I'm opening up for discussion among the commissioners.
I'm just wondering if our staff from Tri-County Health has had opportunity to view the sound study that was done by the applicant and your thoughts on that.
Kathy Boyer from Tri-County Health Department, 6162 South Willow Drive. Ideally, we would have received the study, prior to the hearing, and we could have shared it and gotten input from people in our office that have more expertise in that particular area. As you know, we were just handed it a few minutes ago, and we looked at it while we were trying to hear public comment at the same time. It explains the methodology. In my experience of looking at these kind of studies, usually what it does is it tells you how the study was done, and then it tells you where noise levels were exceeded, and then it tells you what mitigation measures they would recommend to fix it. The study that I just looked at, as far as I could see just in the few minutes that I saw it, didn't offer any specific mitigation measures. So I can't say, that what they did by moving the stations fixes any noise issues because that wasn't specified in the study. But I think the person who did it is here. Maybe he could better speak to that.
Any other questions for Tri-County Health Department?
Well, yeah, my understanding from what he had said was that they had noise decibel levels, further out at this level, and it continued to decrease. And so where they moved it to, for the first, shooting station to be where it finally hit the reduced decibel level. Yeah.
And I understand that was a mitigation effort, and it makes sense. But, without knowing the topography or the direction that they were shooting, if I'm not mistaken, they did move the stations, but I think they now maybe shoot toward the north, where they shot more toward the east before. I can't say for sure if that completely mitigates the noise at that north property.
Thank you.
So is there anything, or do you have knowledge about the company that went out and did this sound study? Do you not have faith in their?
I have no knowledge of the company.
No knowledge. Okay, so would you still feel that a separate independent study would be required?
No, not necessarily. If, perhaps the person who did the noise study could go that step further to, recommend specific mitigations measures that would, surely
for the future
the noise. Yeah. And I don't know, based on their study, if that would require them going out and doing more measurements, or if what they did was enough. I don't know.
Okay. So if in the future, perhaps there was maybe with, multiple shooters out there and multiple shots and going off at multiple times per hour, if that were to become bothersome, if there were further mitigation efforts that could be taken. Is that what you're looking for?
No, I guess I can't look at the study as it is right now today that I just looked at for the first time and say, yes, what they have done by moving the stations mitigates the noise. I can't say that.
Thank you. Commissioner comments or discussion?
I guess I'll make a couple comments. I appreciated the fact that that even though the hearing was moved, that the applicant actually benefited from hearing some of the comments and made some adjustments, to where the stations were and to improve and the sound and that kind of thing, and the direction and some of the worry. I think my concern is still how this application and this actually fits in this area with I think I still believe that people move to this part of the county for the peace and quiet and quality of life, and that's what really concerns me about this application. I think you've done a fine job with, there is no doubt in my mind that you know what you're doing in terms of developing range, and as I said, I've been before, and I thought it was a lot of fun to a different one, and but I am very concerned about the quality of life impacts, and that is one of the and the compatibility with the residential areas out there, this part of the county, and that is one of our. Those are several criteria that I look at strongly, in addition to the environmental concerns in our use by special review process. So I will not be supporting this application for those reasons.
Thank you, Commissioner Sharp. Any other commissioner comments? No? Then I will entertain a motion, and I've elected to make this motion myself. And a lot of my decision about making this motion are truly based on what, first of all, it's based only on what we've heard today. This is the testimony that counts. Any other studies that were done on noise, I did not consider that. I did not see the video that was sent to us about the informal noise study. I do want to compliment the applicant. I think you've done a good job presenting this, all of the benefits, but I also think that there are some question about compatibility with the neighborhood. And in fact, that's one of the criteria for the use by special review, is that it must assure compatibility between the proposed development or this particular application and the surrounding land uses and the natural environment. Another one of the requirements is that it enhance convenience for the present and future residents of Arapahoe County by ensuring that appropriate supporting activities such as employment, housing, leisure time, and retail centers are in close proximity to one another. I also did consider the discussions back and forth between the hazard of lead, and I'm not convinced one way or the other. I do believe that there are questions, there are concerns. So, based on these, in the case of U17-004, Silver Creek Sporting Club use by special review, I have reviewed the staff report, including all exhibits and attachments, and have listened to the applicant's presentation and the public comment as presented at the hearing, and hereby move to deny this application based on the following findings. That the application does not assure the compatibility between the current uses of the land, that the question of health and safety of the lead has not been completely answered to date, and that the noise study based on single shots and not on multiple shots from multiple locations all contribute to this motion to deny.
I'll second.
Motion was made by Commissioner Baker and seconded by Commissioner Sharp. Ms. Sanchez, would you call the roll?
Commissioner Jackson?
I'm always first, and I just want to say this was a very difficult decision, and I did have on my notes here, which I keep referring to, conditions B and E on our staff summary report of the Land Development Code. And so I do appreciate the applicant's really hard work and diligence and changing certain things in the array of various stations. But as development moves eastward, so must projects like this, I believe. So I'm going to vote against it.
Against the
for the motion to deny. Sorry.
Commissioner Holland?
Vote aye for the motion.
Commissioner Sharp?
I'm for the motion.
Commissioner Conti?
Supporting the motion.
Commissioner Baker?
Supporting the motion. So the motion has been denied. The application has been denied. And that ends our general business items. Are there any other commissioner comments? Our meeting is adjourned.
Are we going to get a break before the next meeting?
We're going to get food brought in? What is? What is she done for?
Or do we go directly to next week?
We have things to sign from last time, last year.
Yeah, okay, very good. Okay, that's what I didn't know.
Businessman.
It sounded kind of cool, but it wasn't compatible with neighbors.